Here's a hoodie and a $50 card. My wife's sister, the CEO, mocked as she fired me and withhold my $250,000 bonus. But at the Series B meeting, the lead investor reviewed my termination file. He pushed it back across the table and said to the CEO, "Congratulations, you just lost your company." You know that moment when you realize you've been replaced by a piece of cheap cotton? Yeah, that was me last Tuesday at 2:47 p.m., sitting in the glass conference room that overlooked the very office I helped build from scratch, watching my wife's sister Miranda, the self-appointed CEO queen of everything who never wrote a single line of code, slide a company hoodie and a $50 Visa gift card across the mahogany table like she was handing out participation trophies at a kindergarten field day. "Here's a hoodie and a 50, she said with that fake smile that could curdle milk faster than lightning strikes twice. The smile didn't reach her eyes, which were doing that cold, dead fish thing that people do when they're pretending to have empathy but really just want you to leave so they can get back to their overpriced latte and self-congratulatory LinkedIn post about making tough leadership decisions. I looked at the hoodie, navy blue with the company logo I designed embroidered on the front in gold thread that probably cost more per square inch than my severance package. Then back at her perfectly contoured face and said, "Oh wow, my severance package comes with insulation. How thoughtful. Does it come in backstabbed gray? Or is navy the only option for people you're screwing over today?" She laughed like she was doing me some massive favor, like I should be grateful. She even remembered to throw me a bone on my way out the door. That laugh, man. It was the kind of laugh that makes you want to check your wallet to make sure nothing's missing. The kind that sounds like champagne glasses clinking at a party you weren't invited to, even though you paid for the venue. My $250,000 performance bonus, the one that was contractually promised, the one I'd been banking on literally and figuratively, the one that was supposed to help me finally pay off my student loans and maybe, just maybe, take a vacation somewhere that didn't involve a Holiday Inn Express, had been conveniently withheld for restructuring reasons. Whatever the hell that meant. I'm pretty sure restructuring reasons is corporate speak for, "We're keeping your money because we can, and what are you going to do about it, loser?" Her father, the chairman and founder who I'd once respected, who I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning helping with pitch decks and investor presentations, sat beside her pretending his coffee mug was the most fascinating archaeological discovery of the 21st century. He couldn't even look at me. Just kept rotating that mug like it held the secrets of the universe, studying the company logo like he'd never seen it before, even though I was the one who designed that too back when we were working out of his garage and eating ramen for dinner 6 nights a week. My wife, Danielle, avoided eye contact completely. She sat there at the end of the table, my own wife, the woman I'd been married to for 7 years, the woman who promised to have my back through thick and thin, studying her manicured fingernails like they were about to reveal the meaning of life. She wouldn't even glance in my direction. It was like I'd suddenly become invisible, or worse, like I was something embarrassing she needed to pretend didn't exist, like a weird uncle at Thanksgiving who won't stop talking about conspiracy theories. That's when it hit me, like a freight train loaded with irony and topped with a nice garnish of betrayal. I'd just been fired by family. Not just any family, but the family I'd helped build a multi-million-dollar company for. The family I trusted. The family I'd given everything to, including my 20s, my health, my sanity, and apparently my ability to recognize when I was being slowly pushed off a cliff. And all I got was a lousy hoodie that smelled like betrayal, corporate arrogance, and whatever chemical they use to make cheap promotional merchandise that falls apart after 3 washes. Oh, and $50. Let's not forget the $50. I could almost buy groceries for a week with that. Almost. I picked up the hoodie, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Probably weighed about as much as their gratitude, which is to say, practically nothing. The fabric was that weird synthetic blend that makes you sweat when it's warm and provides absolutely no warmth when it's cold. Perfect metaphor for this whole situation, really. Is there a receipt? I asked, keeping my voice level even though I wanted to scream. In case I want to return it for something more useful? Like my dignity? Or maybe just store credit? Miranda's smile tightened. "We think you'll find this is a generous package given the circumstances." The circumstances being that I built the core platform you're all getting rich off of? "You were compensated fairly for your work," she said, her voice taking on that HR-approved tone that means the conversation is over and you're supposed to just accept your fate like a good little terminated employee. Her father finally looked up from his coffee mug, his eyes meeting mine for just a second before darting away like a guilty dog who knows he knocked over the trash can. "Jordan, we appreciate everything you've done for the company. This is just business. Just business. Right. Because nothing says just business like firing your son-in-law in a glass conference room where everyone in the office can watch. Like some twisted reality show episode where the likable character gets voted off the island by the people he thought were his allies." I stood up, tucked the hoodie under my arm like it was a trophy I'd won at the world's saddest competition, and picked up the gift card. $50 whole. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. The employees outside the glass walls, the ones I'd mentored and helped hire, all pretending to work while watching the drama unfold like it was better than anything on Netflix. "Well," I said, pushing my chair in because my mom raised me right even if these people didn't. "Thanks for the memories. And the hoodie. I'll treasure it forever. Or at least until it shrinks in the wash, which based on the quality, should be roughly next Tuesday." I walked toward the door, and Miranda called after me. "Your access will be revoked by end of day. Security will escort you out." Of course they would. Because nothing says, "We value your contributions," like having a 19-year-old security guard named Brad watch you pack your desk into a cardboard box like you're some kind of criminal who might steal the staplers on your way out. As I left that conference room, walking past the desks I'd helped pick out, past the motivational posters I'd always found ridiculous, past the coffee machine I'd personally funded when the company was too broke to buy one, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like clarity. The kind of clarity you get when you finally realize you've been playing chess with people who don't even know the rules, who think the knight moves in a straight line and that checkmate is just a suggestion. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd gotten rid of the problem, cleared the deadweight, simplified the cap table, whatever corporate buzzword makes people feel better about screwing over the people who actually did the work. But here's the thing about underestimating people. It's really, really fun to prove them wrong. And I had a feeling, just a tiny, delicious little feeling buried under all the humiliation and shock, that this wasn't over. Not even close. I walked out of that building wearing my new hoodie, $50 richer and $250,000 poorer, but with something they couldn't take away. I knew where all the bodies were buried. Metaphorically speaking, of course. And sometimes, knowledge is worth more than money. Sometimes it's worth everything. It wasn't always this ridiculous, you know? There was actually a time when we were all on the same team, back when dreams were bigger than egos and nobody was wearing designer suits to meetings because nobody was having meetings. We were too busy actually working. I joined the company back when it wasn't even a company, just an idea scribbled on napkins and a two-car garage in Pasadena that smelled like burnt pizza, stale energy drinks, and the kind of desperation that comes from believing you're about to change the world armed with nothing but laptops held together with duct tape and pure stubbornness. This was before the fancy office with the exposed brick and the artisanal coffee bar. This was when office perks meant someone remembered to buy toilet paper for the bathroom we shared with the garage's water heater. Miranda didn't even know what a motherboard was back then. I'm not being mean. That's just a fact. She literally thought it was something that came with Wi-Fi built in, like it was a household appliance you could pick up at Best Buy. "Does it come in white?" she asked once, completely serious, while I was elbow deep in a server rack trying to figure out why our whole system kept crashing every 47 minutes like clockwork. Her father, Richard, back when I was allowed to call him Richard instead of Mr. Chun, or Sir, or the guy who pretends not to know me at company functions, had the business vision. He'd made some money in real estate, had connections with investors, understood market timing, and all that MBA stuff that sounds impressive at cocktail parties. But tech? The man could barely send an email without accidentally CCing his entire contact list and somehow attaching the same file 17 times. That's where I came in. Fresh out of Carnegie Mellon with a degree in computer science, stupid enough to believe that talent and hard work actually mattered, naive enough to think that helping build something from the ground up meant you'd actually get credit for it later. I was 24 years old and convinced I was going to be the next tech success story. Spoiler alert, I was half right about the success story part, just wrong about who'd be taking credit for it. We used to pull all-nighters in that garage, surviving on pizza that we ordered from the same place so often that the delivery guy, Marcus, knew our order by heart and started just showing up at midnight without us even calling. Extra large pepperoni, breadsticks, and a 2-liter of Mountain Dew, he'd say, and we'd hand him cash we couldn't really afford to spend because nobody had explained to us that you're supposed to eat things other than pizza when you're building a startup. I'd be hunched over my laptop, writing code until my eyes felt like they were bleeding, building the software architecture that would eventually become the platform Miranda now claimed to have conceived and designed herself. Richard would pace back and forth, talking about market opportunities and investor pitches, getting genuinely excited about the possibilities. And Miranda? She'd bring snacks. That was literally her job. She'd show up around 7 with bags from Trader Joe's, unload some hummus and pita chips, maybe some of those dark chocolate peanut butter cups, and then sit on the old couch scrolling through Instagram while occasionally asking, "How's it going?" Like she was checking on a science project. My wife, girlfriend back then, Danielle, would stop by after her nursing shifts, still in her scrubs, bringing actual food that contained vegetables and protein. She'd sit next to me, rub my shoulders while I coded, and tell me how proud she was. "You're going to change everything, babe," she'd say, kissing the top of my head. "I can feel it. This is going to be huge." I believed her. We all believed it. That's the thing about the garage days. Everyone's equal when you're all sitting on folding chairs, and the biggest perk is that someone's spring for name-brand soda instead of the generic stuff that tastes like disappointment and artificial sweeteners. Richard used to say it all the time. "Someday, this will be huge. Someday, people will be talking about what we built here." He'd gesture around the garage like it was already a shrine to innovation, like the oil stain on the concrete floor and the boxes of old Christmas decorations stacked in the corner were going to be part of the origin story they'd tell at TED Talks. I believed him. God help me, I actually believed him. I gave them everything. My brain, obviously, every algorithm, every line of code, every architectural decision that made the platform actually work instead of just being another failed startup that crashed and burned before anyone even knew it existed. I gave them my weekends, which turned into every weekend for 3 years straight. I gave them my evenings, my early mornings, my lunch breaks that I spent debugging instead of eating. I gave them a spine shaped like a question mark from sitting too long at a desk that was actually a folding table we'd bought at a garage sale for $15. I gave them relationships with my college friends because I was always too busy to hang out. I gave them my health. Hello, 30 pounds of weight gain from the pizza and Mountain Dew diet, plus the constant stress headaches and the way my left eye started twitching whenever I thought about deadlines. I gave them my confidence in humanity, my ability to trust people, and apparently my common sense, because if I'd had any sense at all, I would have gotten everything in writing from day one instead of accepting handshakes and promises from people who treated me like family right up until the moment it became inconvenient. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday in March, around 4 in the morning. I'd been working on the user authentication system for weeks, trying to make it both secure and fast, which is like trying to make something both fireproof and made of paper. And then suddenly, it clicked. I saw how to structure the whole thing, how to make it work in a way that was actually elegant instead of just functional. I shouted so loud I woke up Richard, who'd fallen asleep on the couch still holding his phone. "I got it," I yelled. "I figured it out." He jumped up, confused and probably thinking there was a fire. "What? What happened?" "The authentication system. I know how to make it work." And you know what he did? He hugged me. Actually hugged me. This 50-something-year-old businessman in wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt that had seen better days, hugging a sleep-deprived 26-year-old who probably smelled like he hadn't showered in 2 days because, well, I hadn't. "You're a genius, Jordan," he said. "We couldn't do this without you. You know that, right? You're the heart of this whole operation. The heart of the operation." I remember that phrase specifically because I thought about it a lot later, like during the firing, wondering at what point does the heart of an operation become expendable? At what point do you decide the heart isn't necessary anymore? That maybe you can just replace it with something cheaper that looks good in investor presentations? Miranda showed up later that morning with celebratory donuts, Krispy Kreme, the good ones, not the grocery store brand, and actually seemed happy for us. For me. "This is amazing, Jordan," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "You're incredible." Danielle came by after her shift, and we all sat in that garage eating donuts and drinking cheap champagne that Richard had picked up from the liquor store down the street, toasting to our future success. To us, Richard said, raising his plastic cup. To the team that's going to change everything. To the team, we all echoed, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is what success feels like. Not the money or the fame or any of that stuff. Just sitting in a garage with people who appreciate you, people who see your value, people who are grateful for what you bring to the table. Looking back now, I realized that was probably the last genuinely happy moment I had with any of them. After that, things started changing. Slowly at first, so slowly I didn't even notice. But they changed. The garage got replaced with a real office. The folding chairs became Herman Miller errands. The pizza became catered lunches from trendy restaurants. And somehow, in all that upgrading, I went from being the heart of the operation to former contractor who provided technical assistance. Funny how that works, isn't it? How the same people who once thanked me for saving the company ended up handing me a hoodie like I was being released from a hostage situation. How the guy who built the foundation got pushed out before anyone could see what the building looked like finished. But that Tuesday morning in March, drinking cheap champagne from a plastic cup at 5:30 in the morning, I didn't know any of that yet. I was just happy, just proud, just stupid enough to think loyalty actually meant something. Man, was I wrong. The clues were there the whole time, practically screaming at me through a megaphone. But I ignored them like an idiot who thinks that if you just work hard enough and keep your head down, everything will magically work out in your favor. Turns out, that's not how the world works. That's not how any of this works. But hindsight's 2020, and I was walking around basically blind, wearing rose-colored glasses and a dunce cap. It started small. So small I almost missed it, which I'm sure was exactly the point. First, my name disappeared from the product credits. You know, that little section in the app where it lists all the people who built the thing? Yeah, I went from being listed as lead developer and co-founder to just gone. Vanished. Like I'd been snapped out of existence by some corporate Thanos who decided I wasn't part of the endgame anymore. I noticed it during a product demo we were doing for potential investors. Miranda was showing off the app on the big screen in the conference room, clicking through features I'd spent months building, and when she scrolled past the credits page, I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. My name just wasn't there. In its place was some generic text about our talented team of engineers, like I was part of some anonymous collective instead of the guy who literally wrote 90% of the code base. I brought it up to Miranda after the meeting, trying to keep it casual because I didn't want to seem paranoid or petty. Hey, I noticed my name's not in the credits anymore. That a bug or something? She barely looked up from her phone. Oh, we're just streamlining things, making it less cluttered. You know how investors are. They don't want to read through a bunch of names. They want clean, simple design. Right? I said, even though that made absolutely zero sense. Clean and simple. Got it. But it didn't stop there. Oh no. That was just the opening act of the magic show where I slowly disappeared from my own company. Next, my name vanished from the investor decks. You know those PowerPoint presentations that make or break funding rounds? The ones where you tell the story of your company and convince rich people to give you money? Yeah, those. I used to be featured on slide 3, right after the problem statement and before the solution. Meet our team, it said, with my photo and a little bio about my background at Carnegie Mellon and my experience in software architecture. Then one day, poof, gone. Replaced by a slide that just showed Miranda and her father, with some vague text underneath about our experienced leadership team with deep roots in technology and business. Deep roots in technology? Miranda's deepest root in technology was knowing how to update her Instagram stories. But sure, let's go with that. I found out about this one by accident. I was walking past the conference room, the same glass box where I'd eventually get fired, actually, which is kind of poetically ironic, and saw Miranda rehearsing her pitch. I stood there watching through the glass, and when that slide came up, I literally felt my stomach drop. It was like watching yourself get erased in real time. Like Back to the Future when Marty starts disappearing from the photograph, except nobody was trying to fix it. They were just letting me fade away. Then came the group chat incident, which honestly should have been my wake-up call, the moment where I packed my stuff and got the hell out. But no, I was still operating under the delusion that we were all friends here, all family, all in this together. We had this Slack channel called founding team, where the core group of us would discuss strategy, share updates, make decisions about the direction of the company. It was me, Miranda, Richard, and Tom, our CFO, who'd joined early on. One day, I sent a message about a critical security update we needed to implement. Something that couldn't wait because we just hit 50,000 users and our current setup was basically held together with digital duct tape and prayers. Nobody responded. Not for hours. I kept checking my phone, refreshing Slack, thinking maybe there was a glitch. Finally, around 6 p.m., Miranda responded. But not with words. Just a thumbs-up emoji. A single, solitary thumbs-up emoji to a message about a critical security issue that could have tanked the entire company if something went wrong. I texted Tom directly. "Hey, did you see my message in the founding team channel?" "What channel?" he wrote back. My blood went cold. "The founding team channel. The one we've been using for like 2 years. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. Dude, I'm not in a channel called that. There's a leadership team channel, but you're not." "Oh, hang on." He didn't text back after that. Later, I found out what happened. They'd created a new channel, moved everyone except me into it, and just left me in the old one, typing messages into the void like some kind of digital ghost haunting the Slack workspace. Occasionally, someone would pop back into the old channel to respond with a thanks emoji or a got it, just to keep up appearances, but all the real conversations were happening somewhere I couldn't see. When I asked Miranda what was going on, she gave me this practice smile, the kind politicians use when they're about to lie to your face and pretend it's for your own good. "We're just simplifying communication, Jordan. Too many channels, too much noise. We're trying to be more efficient." "Efficient," I repeated, tasting the word like it was poison. "Right. So efficient that I'm not included in conversations about the company I helped build." "You're still part of the tech team channel," she said, like she was doing me a favor. "All the development discussions happen there." "Yeah, the tech team channel, where I'd been demoted from co-founder to just another developer, from someone who made decisions to someone who implemented other people's decisions, from a person with a name to just another cog in the machine." Even the interns started noticing. Kevin, this kid fresh out of college with the kind of enthusiasm that made me remember what it was like to actually enjoy working there, pulled me aside one day in the break room. He looked nervous, like he was about to tell me something he wasn't supposed to know. Dude," he whispered, glancing around to make sure nobody was listening. "Your photo's not on the company website anymore." I pulled out my phone right there, navigated to the About Us page, and sure enough, Kevin was right. The page that used to have 4 headshots now only had 3. Miranda, Richard, and Tom, all smiling professionally like they'd just won some kind of award for entrepreneurship. Me? Nowhere to be found. It was like I'd never existed. "Maybe the server's allergic to loyalty," I said, trying to play it off as a joke even though I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Kevin didn't laugh. He just looked at me with this mix of pity and confusion, like he couldn't understand why I was still there, why I hadn't already figured out what was happening. "Man, that's messed up," he said. "Yeah," I agreed. "It really is." That was the first time I realized I wasn't just being left out. I was being erased. Systematically, deliberately erased. They were rewriting history, and I was the inconvenient chapter they wanted to delete. Every trace of my contribution was being scrubbed away like I was some kind of mistake they needed to correct, some error in the code that needed debugging. I started documenting everything after that. Screenshots of the old website with my name on it, saved copies of the original investor decks, emails where Richard and Miranda thanked me for my work and called me essential to the company's success. I didn't know what I was going to do with all of it yet, but some instinct told me to keep records, to have proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I'd actually done what I knew I'd done. Because at a certain point, when enough people tell you that you're not important, that you're just technical assistants, that you're expendable, you start to wonder if maybe they're right. You start to question your own memories, your own worth, your own reality. But I had the emails. I had the screenshots. I had the code itself, sitting in repositories with my name on every commit. They could erase me from their presentations and their websites and their Slack channels, but they couldn't erase the truth. Not yet, anyway. Looking back, I should have seen what was coming. The erasure was just preparation, softening the ground before they dropped the bomb. They were building a narrative where I'd never really mattered, where my contributions were minimal, where firing me would barely register as a blip on anyone's radar. They were writing me out of the story before they kicked me out of the building. And for a while there, I almost let them get away with it. One late night, while packing my files, because apparently even though they were erasing me from existence, I still had to organize my own digital funeral. I saw a new folder on the shared drive labeled Founding Narrative, Final. And let me tell you, when you see a folder with your company's name on it followed by the words Founding Narrative, and you weren't consulted about said narrative, that's what we call a red flag the size of Texas. It was 11:30 on a Thursday, and I was the only one still in the office because I was an idiot who thought staying late showed dedication. Everyone else had gone home to their lives, their families, their normal human activities that didn't involve slowly realizing you were being screwed over by people you trusted. I was sitting there in the dim overhead lighting, my desk lamp casting weird shadows across my keyboard, going through folders and downloading files to my external hard drive because something in my gut told me I'd need them later. The shared drive was organized like a digital junk drawer, folders within folders, random files with names like final_v3_use_this_1.docs, because nobody in the history of startups has ever figured out version control for documents. I was clicking through, half paying attention, when I saw it. Brand new folder. Created 3 days ago. Founding Narrative, Final. I should have closed it. I should have respected whatever privacy boundary that folder represented and just kept packing my stuff. But curiosity killed the cat, and apparently it was also about to radicalize the software developer, so I double-clicked. The folder opened, and there it was, a 37-page document titled Company Origin Story, Investor Materials. 37 pages. I opened it, took a sip of my now-cold coffee, and started reading. Page 1 was fine. Standard stuff about market opportunity, the problem we were solving, why now was the right time. Page 2 talked about Richard's background in business, his success in real estate, his visionary leadership. Okay, fine. That was all true, more or less. Page 3 is where things got interesting. Miranda Chun, founder and chief executive officer, conceived the original platform architecture in early 2019. I read that sentence 3 times, thinking maybe I was having a stroke, maybe the fluorescent lights had finally fried my brain, maybe I'd fallen asleep at my desk, and this was all just a stress dream brought on by too much caffeine and not enough therapy. Miranda had conceived the platform architecture. Miranda, who thought a motherboard was a Wi-Fi accessory. Miranda, who once asked me if we needed to download more RAM. Miranda, who literally, and I mean literally, didn't know what an API was until I explained it to her using a restaurant analogy that I had to repeat 3 times. I kept reading, and it got worse. So much worse. Drawing on her background in computer science and software engineering. I actually laughed out loud at that one. Her background in computer science consisted of one intro course she took as a college elective and dropped halfway through because, and I quote, "There's too much math." Software engineering? The woman's most advanced technical skill was knowing how to change her iPhone wallpaper. Miranda designed and built the core platform herself over the course of 18 months, working tirelessly to bring her vision to life. I nearly choked on my coffee. Designed and built the core platform herself. Herself. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling like I'd just discovered that gravity wasn't real and I'd been walking on the ceiling this whole time without noticing. I kept scrolling, looking for my name, praying there was some mention of me somewhere in this 37-page work of fiction. And oh, I found it all right. Page 23, in a section titled Key Contributors and Support Staff. The company benefited from technical assistance provided by Jordan Hayes, a contractor who helped implement portions of Miranda's design during the initial development phase. Technical assistance. Technical assistance. I was listed under technical assistance, which, by the way, is corporate speak for the guy who plugs things in, or someone we hired on Fiverr to make our logo bigger. A contractor who helped implement portions of her design. Not the lead developer. Not the co-founder. Not the person who spent 3 years of his life building every single feature from scratch. Just some helpful contractor who wandered by and lent a hand, like I was a temp worker they'd hired through an agency. That was my villain origin story right there. That was the moment when whatever loyalty I had left, whatever benefit of the doubt I'd been clinging to, Whatever naive hope that this was all just a misunderstanding, it all evaporated like morning dew in the desert sun. I sat there in that empty office, the building completely silent except for the hum of the servers in the next room. Servers I configured, by the way, and something inside me just shifted. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my coffee mug at the wall, even though it would have been deeply satisfying. I didn't send an angry email or storm into someone's office or do any of the dramatic things you see in movies when someone discovers they've been betrayed. I just smiled. A slow, cold smile that probably would have scared me if I could have seen my own reflection. I opened another tab and started downloading everything. And I mean everything. Every email that mentioned my contributions. Every Slack conversation where Richard or Miranda thanked me for solving problems. Every commit message in our code repository showing my name attached to the work. Every version of every document that listed me as co-founder. Every contract, every agreement, every piece of paper trail that proved I wasn't just some contractor who'd provided technical assistance. I created a new folder on my external hard drive, labeled it Insurance Policy, and started the downloads. Some of the files were huge: video recordings of meetings, full database backups, design documents with my notes all over them. My computer chugged along, copying gigabytes of data while I sat there thinking about how spectacularly stupid they'd been. Because here's the thing about erasing someone. You have to actually erase them. You can't just delete them from the website and the investor decks and hope nobody notices. You have to go through everything, every document, every email, every digital footprint. And they hadn't done that. They'd gotten lazy or arrogant or both. They'd assumed I'd just take my hoodie and my $50 and disappear quietly into the night like a good little terminated employee. But while I was downloading, I found something else. Something even better than proof of my contributions. I found the original founder agreement, the one Richard's lawyer had drafted back in the garage days when we were all still pretending to be friends. The one that legally named me as co-owner of the core intellectual property. The one that gave me 22% equity in the company's foundational technology. 22%. The document was dated March 2019, signed by Richard, signed by me, notarized and everything. And here's the beautiful part, the part that made me actually laugh out loud in that empty office. They'd never updated it. Never filed a new agreement. Never had me sign away those rights. They'd just forgotten about it. Or assumed it didn't matter. Or figured I was too dumb to ever look for it. I opened the PDF, zoomed in on the signatures, and just stared at it for a solid 5 minutes. 22% ownership of the core IP. The IP that the entire company was built on. The IP that Miranda had supposedly conceived and designed herself. The IP that was currently valued at, let me check the latest investor deck, approximately $19 million. I did the math in my head. 22% of $19 million. That's $4.18 million. Give or take. I saved 3 copies of that document. One on my external hard drive. One in my personal Google Drive. One attached to an email I sent to myself with the subject line, "Do not delete. Important legal DOC." Then I saved 3 more copies just to be safe, because you can never be too careful when you're sitting on a multi-million-dollar insurance policy that your former employers don't know exists. The downloads finished around 2 in the morning. My external hard drive was packed with evidence, documentation, contracts, and most importantly, that beautiful founder agreement with my signature and Richard's signature and a notary stamp that made it all legal and binding and completely, utterly, devastatingly legitimate. I packed up my stuff, shut down my computer, and walked out of that office feeling like a completely different person than the one who'd walked in. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't confused or betrayed or any of those messy emotions that had been eating at me for months. I was patient and focused and very, very interested in seeing how this was all going to play out. Because Miranda had written herself a nice little fairy tale where she was the genius founder who'd built everything herself. She'd created a narrative where I didn't exist, where my contributions were minimal, where I was just some forgettable contractor who'd helped out here and there. But narratives, I'd recently learned, can be rewritten. And I had the receipts. All of them. Backed up in triplicate. They wanted to play revisionist history? Fine. Game on. But they should have remembered something important about people who build platforms from scratch. We're really, really good at understanding systems. At finding the vulnerabilities. at knowing exactly where the weak points are and how to exploit them. And their weak point was sitting on my external hard drive, in a folder labeled insurance policy, waiting for exactly the right moment to completely destroy their carefully constructed fiction. I just had to be patient. Let them think they'd won. Let them celebrate their victory over the erased contractor who'd helped out with some technical stuff. And then, when they least expected it, show them what happens when you underestimate the guy who actually built the thing you're trying to steal. 2 weeks later, they made it official. Because apparently, slowly erasing someone from existence isn't enough. You also have to perform the ritual humiliation of an actual termination meeting, complete with corporate buzzwords and fake sympathy that makes you want to crawl out of your own skin. I got the calendar invite on a Monday morning. Quick check-in with Miranda and Richard. Classic. They couldn't even be honest in the meeting title. Should have been called, "We're firing you today, hope you didn't have plans," or "The part where we pretend this isn't personal," or maybe just "Corporate execution, please dress accordingly." I knew what was coming, obviously. After finding that founder narrative document and downloading every shred of evidence I could get my hands on, I'd been waiting for this moment. The only question was how they were going to do it. Would they try to make it seem mutual? Blame it on budget cuts? Claim I wasn't a cultural fit anymore, which is corporate speak for, "We don't like you, but can't legally say that"? I put on my best outfit that morning, not because I wanted to look professional, but because I wanted them to see exactly who they were screwing over. Navy blazer, nice shirt, the good jeans that actually fit right. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, this is the most expensive firing these people are ever going to regret. The meeting was scheduled for 2:30, which was deliberately strategic, late enough that most people had already left for lunch or were in their own meetings, minimizing the number of witnesses to my public execution. But they booked the glass conference room, the fishbowl one right in the middle of the office where everyone could see in if they wanted to. Either they were incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant. Probably both. I showed up exactly on time, carrying my laptop and a notebook, acting like this was just another normal meeting. Miranda was already there, sitting at the head of the table like she was about to chair a board meeting. Her father sat to her right, still doing that thing where he found his coffee mug fascinating. There was a folder in front of Miranda, probably my termination paperwork, and sitting next to it, like the world's saddest party favor, was a company hoodie and what looked like a gift card. Oh, this was going to be good. I sat down across from them, smiled pleasantly, and said, "So, what's up?" The calendar invite said, "Quick check-in. Should I have brought my status updates?" Miranda's fake smile could have curdled milk, frozen it solid, and then used it as a weapon. "Jordan, thanks for meeting with us. I'm sure you know the company has been going through some changes." "Changes?" I repeated, nodding like this was brand new information. "Right, yeah. I noticed my name disappeared from the website. That one of the changes." Her smile flickered for just a second. "We're restructuring the organization to better align with our growth trajectory." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Growth trajectory. These people could make firing someone sound like they were doing you a favor, like they were actually helping you by removing you from their growth trajectory, so you didn't get hurt by all that success they were about to have without you. And as part of this restructuring, she continued, sliding into her rehearsed script like she'd practiced this in front of a mirror, we've made the difficult decision to transition away from some of our early contractor relationships. Contractor relationships. There it was. The new narrative, already fully formed. Not co-founder. Not lead developer. Not the guy who built the entire platform. Just a contractor. Someone temporary. Someone expendable. Richard finally looked up from his mug. "Jordan, we want you to know how much we've appreciated your contributions to the company. You've been helpful." Helpful. I'd been helpful. Like I was a summer intern who'd made decent coffee and organized the supply closet. "This must be so hard for you," I said, putting on my most sympathetic voice. "Having to fire family. That's got to sting a little bit, right?" Miranda's expression went cold. "This is a business decision, Jordan. Nothing personal." "Oh, totally," I agreed. "Super not personal. That's why you're doing it in the glass conference room where everyone can watch, right? For privacy." She ignored that, pushing the folder across the table toward me. "Here's your separation agreement. We're offering you a generous severance package." "Let me guess," I interrupted, pointing at the hoodie. "It includes outerwear?" Richard cleared his throat. "There's also a $50 gift card too." "To where?" I asked. The sorry we stole your life's work store? Because I didn't know that place took gift cards. Miranda's jaw tightened. She slid the hoodie toward me like it was a peace offering, like this cheap piece of promotional merchandise was supposed to make up for stealing my company, my equity, my credit for everything I'd built. We thought you might want something to remember your time here. I picked up the hoodie, felt the weight of it in my hands. Probably cost them $20 wholesale, maybe less if they ordered in bulk, and looked at her with the most genuine smile I could manage. Oh wow, my severance package comes with insulation. How thoughtful. Does this come in backstabbed gray? Or is navy the only option for people you're screwing over today? She didn't laugh. Her father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and I could see Miranda's perfectly manicured fingers drumming on the table, a tell that she was getting annoyed. Good. I wanted her annoyed. I wanted her uncomfortable. I wanted her to remember this moment later when everything fell apart. There's also the matter of your bonus, she said, trying to regain control of the conversation. Unfortunately, due to the restructuring, we won't be able to honor the performance bonus outlined in your original agreement. Ah, there it was. The $250,000 they were just casually deciding not to pay me. Restructuring reasons, I said. Right. That's what we're calling theft now. It's not theft, Miranda said, her voice getting sharper. It's a business decision based on current financial realities and the fact that you'd rather keep the money than pay the person who actually earned it. I finished. Yeah, I get it. Financial realities. Gotta love those. Richard finally found his voice. Jordan, you're being unreasonable. We're offering you a fair package considering the circumstances. I looked at him. This man who'd hugged me in his garage at 4 a.m, who'd called me a genius, who'd told me I was the heart of the operation. Fair, I said quietly. You think this is fair? He couldn't hold my gaze. Dropped his eyes right back to that coffee mug like it held the secrets of the universe. I stood up, tucked the hoodie under my arm like it was a trophy I'd won at the world's saddest competition, and picked up the gift card. $50 whole. I could almost buy groceries for a week with that. Almost. Well, I said, pushing my chair in because my mother raised me to have manners even when dealing with backstabbers and thieves. Thanks for the memories. And the hoodie. I'll treasure it forever. Or at least until it shrinks in the wash, which based on the quality, should be roughly next Tuesday. Miranda stood up too, trying to maintain some semblance of control over this conversation that had definitely not gone according to her script. Your access will be revoked by end of day. Security will escort you out to collect your personal items. Security, I repeated. Because obviously, I'm such a threat. Might steal some post-it notes on my way out. Guard the supply closet, Miranda. I'm feeling dangerous. I walked toward the door, and she called after me, probably feeling like she needed to get the last word in, needed to assert her authority one more time. Jordan, I hope you understand this is nothing personal. Sometimes businesses need to make tough choices to move forward. I stopped at the door, turned back to look at both of them sitting there in their expensive chairs in their glass conference room with their stolen company and their fake narrative about who built what. You know what's funny? I said, I actually hope you're right. I hope this is just business. Because if it's personal, that means you're doing this because you actually hate me. But if it's just business, that means you're doing this because you think you can get away with it. And honestly, that's way more interesting. Miranda's expression flickered with confusion. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled. A real smile this time, not the fake corporate ones we'd all been wearing like masks. Nothing. Just an observation. Enjoy your growth trajectory. I walked out of that conference room with my hoodie under my arm and my dignity mostly intact, very aware that everyone in the office was pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. I could feel their eyes on me, probably waiting to see if I'd make a scene, if I'd yell or cry or storm out dramatically. But I didn't do any of that. I just walked calmly to my desk, where a 19-year-old security guard named Brad was already waiting, looking apologetic and uncomfortable because he knew this was messed up, but it was his job, and he needed the paycheck. Hey, Brad, I said, pulling out my desk drawer. Ready to watch me pack up 3 years of my life into a cardboard box? Should be super fun. Sorry, man, Brad muttered. This sucks. Yeah, I agreed, dumping pens and notebooks into the box. It really does. But here's what nobody knew, what nobody could see. I wasn't defeated. I wasn't broken. I was patient. And I was playing a completely different game than the one they thought we were playing. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd successfully removed the problem, cleared the deadweight, simplified their cap table. They thought I was just another expendable employee who'd take his hoodie and his $50 and disappear quietly into the night. They had no idea what was coming. No idea that I had their founder agreement, their emails, their documents, their entire house of cards documented and backed up in triplicate. I walked out of that building carrying my cardboard box and wearing my hoodie of shame, and I was genuinely smiling. Because sometimes, losing the battle means you're about to win the war. And I was about to win so hard. While they celebrated my departure, and oh, they celebrated, I heard through the grapevine that Miranda literally ordered champagne for the office the day after I left. I was busy setting up a completely different game board. One they didn't even know existed. One they wouldn't see until it was way too late to do anything about it. See, here's what people don't understand about revenge. It's not about anger. Anger is hot and messy and makes you do stupid things like send angry emails at 2 in the morning or post rants on LinkedIn that torpedo your own career. No, real revenge is cold. It's calculated. It's methodical. It's sitting in your apartment for 3 weeks straight, living off ramen and spite, building something so airtight that when you finally pull the trigger, there's absolutely nothing they can do to stop it. The first thing I did was call Priya. Priya Mehta, my friend from college who'd gone to law school at Stanford while I was learning to code, who was now a partner at a corporate law firm in San Francisco and owed me a favor from when I helped her move apartments 5 years ago. Turns out, helping someone carry a couch up 4 flights of stairs in August is the kind of favor that pays dividends when you need legal advice about reclaiming stolen intellectual property. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my living room surrounded by printouts of contracts and documents spread across my coffee table like I was planning a heist. Which, in a way, I guess I was. Priya, I said when she picked up, remember when you said if I ever needed anything, I should call? Oh God, she said. What happened? Did you kill someone? Please tell me you didn't kill someone. I do corporate law, not criminal defense. Nobody's dead, I assured her. Yet. But I might need your help making sure some people wish they were. There was a pause, and then I heard her office chair creak as she sat up. I'm listening. I laid out the whole story. The erasure, the fake founding narrative, the firing, the stolen bonus, all of it. And then I told her about the founder agreement. The one that gave me 22% ownership of the core IP. The one they'd apparently forgotten existed. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, you're telling me you have a signed, notarized agreement giving you equity in intellectual property that's currently valued at $19 million, and they just forgot about it? Apparently. Jordan, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I once had a client who tried to trademark the word the. So I have a case? Have a case? Dude, you have a nuclear weapon. We just need to figure out when and how to detonate it for maximum impact. That conversation lasted 3 hours. By the end, we had a plan. A beautiful, airtight, completely legal plan that would make Miranda's fake founding narrative look like the fiction it was. Step 1. Form a holding company. Something discreet. Something that wouldn't raise any red flags if someone happened to Google it. We settled on Nova Bridge Systems, incorporated in Delaware, because Delaware's corporate laws are basically designed for situations exactly like this. Priya handled all the paperwork, filed everything properly, made sure every I was dotted and every T was crossed. Step 2. Transfer the IP rights. This was the tricky part, the part where we had to be absolutely certain everything was legal and documented. Priya drafted a transfer agreement that moved the intellectual property from me personally to Nova Bridge Systems, based on the original founder agreement that had never been invalidated or superseded. We got it notarized, filed it with the proper authorities, made it official. The beauty of it was that we didn't need their permission. The original agreement was clear. I owned 22% of the core IP. I could do whatever I wanted with my share, including transferring it to a holding company. It was like owning 22% of a house and deciding to put your portion in a trust. You don't need the other owner's permission to manage your own property. Step 3. Stay completely silent. This was the hardest part, honestly. I wanted to post about it online, wanted to tell people what was happening, wanted to shout from the rooftops about how I was about to take back everything they'd stolen. But Priya was firm. The moment you say anything publicly, you lose the element of surprise, she explained. Right now, they think you're just some disgruntled ex-employee who's licking his wounds. Let them think that. Let them get comfortable. Let them keep building their company on IP they don't actually fully own. So I stayed quiet. Didn't post on LinkedIn. Didn't subtly tweet about karma or justice or any of those vague things people post when they're mad, but trying to be cryptic. Didn't even tell most of my friends what I was planning. Just kept my head down and let everyone think I'd moved on. But I wasn't alone in this. Kevin, the intern who'd pulled me aside to tell me my photo was gone from the website, reached out about a week after I got fired. He sent me a message on my personal email. Dude, I can't work there anymore. What they did to you was wrong. If you're doing anything to fight back, I want to help. Kevin was young, maybe 23, still had that idealism that makes you think the world should be fair and people should be honest. I almost told him not to get involved, that he should just keep his head down and collect his paycheck. But then I remembered that I'd been exactly like him once, and maybe someone should have helped me back then. Can you document everything? I asked him. Every time Miranda takes credit for something she didn't do, every meeting where they talk about the founding story, every investor pitch where they rewrite history. Already been doing it, he said. I've got recordings. Is that illegal? In California? Only if you don't tell them you're recording. But if you're in a meeting and your phone happens to be on the table recording a voice memo for your own notes, that's legal. Kevin turned out to be an incredibly useful ally. He'd sit in meetings, his phone on the table recording everything, and then send me the files. I heard Miranda tell investors that she'd spent 18 months in her garage building the platform from scratch. I heard Richard describe me as a contractor we brought in briefly to help with implementation. I heard them discuss their Series B pitch and how they needed to control the narrative about the founding team. Every recording, every document, every piece of evidence went into a folder on my external hard drive, right next to the founder agreement and all the other documentation I'd collected. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on their progress through Kevin and through public information. They were gearing up for their Series B funding round, trying to raise $20 million at a $100 million valuation. They'd hired a fancy PR firm to help with their image. They'd done interviews with tech blogs where Miranda positioned herself as a self-made female founder in tech, which would have been inspiring if it wasn't complete fiction. They were building their empire on sand, and they had no idea the tide was about to come in. Priya and I met for coffee every week to review the plan, make sure everything was still airtight, prepare for every possible contingency. She'd quiz me on corporate law, make sure I understood exactly what we were doing and why it would work. The key, she explained over a latte that cost $8 because San Francisco is ridiculous, is that they never properly invalidated the original founder agreement. They just assumed it didn't matter, or that you'd forgotten about it, or that you wouldn't fight back. But legally, you still own that IP. And more importantly, any company built on that IP is potentially vulnerable to an ownership dispute. Which means that when they go to close their Series B, when investors do their due diligence and discover there's a question mark over who actually owns the core technology, those investors are going to run for the hills. No one puts $20 million into a company with unclear IP ownership. It's like buying a house when you're not sure the seller actually owns it. I smiled. So we wait until Series B? We wait until Series B, she confirmed. We let them get right to the finish line. Let them think they've won. And then we pull the rug out so hard they don't even know what hit them. The waiting was brutal. 3 months of watching Miranda give interviews, watching Richard post on LinkedIn about their incredible growth, watching them hire new people and expand the team and act like they'd built something themselves instead of stealing it from someone they'd fired with a hoodie and a $50 gift card. But I stayed patient, stayed quiet, worked on side projects, freelanced a bit to pay rent, and mostly just waited for the right moment. People started asking me what I was doing, why I wasn't more upset, why I wasn't fighting back. My brother called me and said, "Man, you seem way too calm about this. Are you okay? Should I be worried?" "I'm fine," I told him. "Really, I'm just focusing on moving forward." Which was technically true. I was moving forward, just not in the direction anyone expected. Danielle tried to reach out a few times. Text messages saying she was sorry, that she didn't know it would go down like that she tried to talk to her sister, but Miranda wouldn't listen. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She'd sat in that conference room and watched them fire me, watched them humiliate me, and hadn't said a word. Sorry doesn't really cut it after that. Silence, I realized during those 3 months, makes rich people nervous. When you're quiet, when you're not ranting or complaining or making noise, they start to wonder what you're planning. They start to get paranoid. I could almost feel Miranda's anxiety through the internet, the way she kept posting about moving forward and focusing on the future, like she was trying to convince herself that I was really gone, really out of the picture, really not a threat anymore. But I was a threat. I was the biggest threat they'd ever faced. I just wasn't ready to show my hand yet. 3 months after I got fired, Kevin sent me a message. Series B pitch is next week. Grand Meridian Ballroom. Huge investor meeting. Miranda's been practicing her presentation nonstop. I forwarded the message to Priya. She responded with a single word. Perfect. It was time. Time to stop being quiet. Time to stop being patient. Time to show them what happens when you steal from someone who actually knows how to build things. The game was about to get very, very interesting. Fast forward 3 months. Series B day. The day Miranda had been preparing for like it was the Olympics, and she was going for gold in the bullshit backstory event. They booked the Grand Meridian Ballroom because apparently nothing screams, we're a scrappy startup, like dropping what I estimated to be at least 50 grand on a venue that looked like it was designed for royal weddings. $10,000 floral arrangements. And yes, I looked up how much those massive centerpieces cost because I'm petty like that. Crystal chandeliers, waiters in actual bow ties serving champagne, and those tiny appetizers that cost $40 a plate and leave you hungrier than when you started. The whole thing was so over the top, it was almost impressive. Almost. If it wasn't being funded by investor money that could have gone toward, I don't know, actually improving the product or paying the people who built it. I showed up too. Uninvited, obviously. Priya had advised against it. You don't need to be there, Jordan. Let me handle the legal side. But there was no way I was missing this. I'd waited 3 months for this moment. I'd stayed quiet, stayed patient, played the long game. I deserved to watch the fireworks. Plus, I had a secret weapon. My access card still worked. Yeah, you read that right. These geniuses, these brilliant business minds who were about to pitch themselves as the next big thing in tech, had forgotten to revoke my building access. I discovered this about a week after getting fired when I drove past the office late one night and decided to test my card on the parking garage gate just out of curiosity. The gate opened. The elevator let me up to the 3rd floor. My card unlocked the main office door. I could have stolen everything. Could have walked out with computers, files, furniture, the espresso machine Miranda had special ordered from Italy. But I didn't, because that would have been illegal and stupid. Instead, I just filed that information away as a beautiful example of their incompetence and waited for the right moment to use it. That moment was now. I arrived at the Grand Meridian at 6 p.m., an hour before the investor presentation was scheduled to start. Wore a suit, not my best suit, but a good one, the kind that says, I belong here, without screaming, I'm trying too hard. I walked through the main entrance like I owned the place, nodded at the security guard who was too busy checking his phone to ask for credentials, and made my way to the ballroom level. The Grand Meridian has this beautiful setup where the ballroom is surrounded by smaller conference rooms, all with glass walls that look into the main space. Perfect for watching a presentation without actually being in the room. Perfect for staying invisible while seeing everything. I found an empty conference room on the south side, the one with the best view of the stage and the investor seating area. Slipped inside, left the lights off, and settled into a chair by the window. From there, I could see everything. The stage with its massive screen for presentations. The rows of chairs filling up with investors in expensive suits. The bar area where waiters were setting up for the post-pitch reception. And through the glass partition that separated the ballroom from the pre-function space, I could see Miranda doing her pre-game ritual. She was pacing, practicing hand gestures, occasionally checking her reflection in one of the decorative mirrors like she was preparing for an Oscar acceptance speech instead of a funding pitch. She looked nervous. Good. She should be nervous. Richard was there too, playing the role of supportive father and chairman, occasionally putting a hand on her shoulder and saying things I couldn't hear but could easily imagine. You've got this, sweetie. Just stick to the script. They're going to love you. The investors started filing in around 6:30. I recognized a few faces from tech blogs and Forbes articles. Sarah Chun from Redpoint Ventures. Marcus Washington from Sequoia. And there, walking in like he owned not just the room but the entire concept of venture capital, was Gregory Keating from Northbridge Capital. Keating was legendary in the VC world. Old school, probably in his mid-60s, with the kind of reputation that made founders either really excited or really terrified to pitch to him. He was known for two things: writing massive checks when he believed in something, and absolutely destroying companies when he found out they'd lied to him. He had zero tolerance for bullshit, which in the venture capital world made him basically a unicorn. Kevin had texted me earlier that Northbridge was leading the round, that Keating himself was coming to the pitch, that this was make or break for the company. Miranda's freaking out, he'd written. She's been practicing her answers to possible questions for like 3 days straight. I watched Keating take his seat in the front row, right in the center. He had a leather portfolio that he opened methodically, pulling out what looked like due diligence documents. The man came prepared. I love that about him already. At 7 p.m. sharp, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. And there she was, Miranda, walking out in a power suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, smiling like she was about to deliver the news that would change everyone's lives. "Good evening," she began. Her voice projected through the ballroom speakers with that practiced confidence of someone who's rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "Thank you all for being here. I'm Miranda Chun, founder and CEO, and I'm here to tell you about how we're revolutionizing enterprise software." I settled deeper into my chair, watching through the glass. This was going to be good. The presentation was exactly what I expected. Slick slides, impressive metrics, all the right buzzwords delivered at all the right moments. Synergy, AI integration, holistic frameworks, disruptive innovation. Bingo card of meaningless corporate speak that somehow convinced people to hand over millions of dollars. She showed growth charts that went up and to the right, the universal sign of a company worth investing in. She talked about their innovative technology platform, without once mentioning who actually built the innovative technology platform. She displayed customer testimonials and revenue projections and market opportunity slides that made it look like they were about to take over the world. And then, about 20 minutes in, she got to the founding story. "I started this company in my father's garage 3 years ago," she said, and I actually had to suppress a laugh. "With a vision to transform how businesses manage their operations. I spent 18 months designing and building the core platform, teaching myself software engineering." Teaching herself software engineering. Oh, that was rich. The woman who thought you could download more RAM had taught herself software engineering. And through dedication and hard work, we built something truly special. Something that's now serving over 500 enterprise clients and generating $8 million in annual recurring revenue. The investors were nodding, taking notes. They looked impressed. Of course they looked impressed. The story was good. It was inspiring. Female founder, self-made, built everything herself, classic American dream stuff. It would have been perfect if any of it was true. She clicked to the next slide. Meet our team. There was her photo, Richard's photo, Tom the CFO's photo. 3 headshots, 3 bios, 3 people who'd apparently built this entire company through sheer force of will and definitely not by stealing it from someone they'd fired with a hoodie. Keating raised his hand. Miranda paused mid-sentence, looking slightly thrown off by the interruption. "Yes, Mr. Keating?" "Quick question," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Your documentation mentions a Jordan Hayes, former contractor, terminated 3 months ago. Can you tell me about his role?" I stopped breathing. Even from my hidden conference room, I could see Miranda's face go pale for just a second before she recovered. "Jordan was a contractor who helped with some implementation work early on," she said smoothly. "Very talented developer, but ultimately not the right fit as we scaled. We parted ways amicably." "Amicably? Sure. If you consider firing someone in a glass conference room and withholding their bonus amicable." Keating nodded slowly. "I see. And the intellectual property he worked on during his time as a contractor, that's all properly assigned to the company." Miranda's smile tightened just slightly. "Of course. All standard contractor agreements." "Excellent," Keating said, making a note in his portfolio. "Just doing my due diligence. Please continue." She continued, but I could see she was rattled. Her hand gestures were a little less confident. Her smile a little less bright. She wrapped up the presentation 10 minutes later, opened the floor to questions, and handled them well enough. The investors seemed satisfied. The mood in the room was positive. This was it. The moment where they thought they'd won. The moment where Miranda believed she'd successfully pulled off the heist, convinced everyone that she was the brilliant founder who'd built everything herself. I pulled out my phone and texted Priya. They just finished the pitch. Keating asked about me. She lied. You're up. 3 dots appeared, then, on it. Stay where you are. This is going to be fun. Through the glass, I watched the investors mingle, networking and drinking champagne, and making small talk about market opportunities and exit strategies. Miranda was in the center of it all, glowing with confidence, shaking hands, and accepting congratulations like she'd already closed the deal. Richard was beaming, looking proud enough to burst. Tom was making jokes with some of the younger investors. Kevin was in the corner, trying to stay invisible, occasionally glancing at his phone. He was in on the plan, not all of it, but enough to know that something was about to happen. And then Keating pulled out his phone, looked at it, frowned, said something to his associate, who also pulled out a phone and started reading. They both looked up at Miranda, their expressions shifting from pleased to confused to something that looked a lot like concern. Keating walked over to Richard, said something I couldn't hear. Richard's smile disappeared. He pulled out his own phone, started scrolling, his face going from tan to pale in about 15 seconds. I watched as Richard grabbed Miranda's arm, pulled her aside, showed her his phone. Her expression went from confused to shocked to absolutely horrified. Priya had sent the email. The email to all the investors, CC&G their lawyers, attaching the founder agreement, the documentation, the evidence. The email that politely explained that there was a significant question about intellectual property ownership, that 22% of the core technology was actually owned by NovaBridge Systems, and that any investment made without resolving this issue would be legally complicated at best and completely worthless at worst. The beautiful thing about well-timed information? It doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be accurate and devastating. And watching the realization spread through that ballroom like a virus was better than any revenge fantasy I could have imagined. Keating didn't waste time. That's what I loved about him immediately, watching from my hidden conference room like I had front row seats to the best show of my life. He didn't wait for a private conversation or pull Miranda aside discreetly. Nope. He walked right up to her in the middle of the ballroom, investors still milling around with champagne glasses, and opened the folder he'd been carrying. The folder that Kevin had told me about. The one labeled Termination File, Jordan Hayes. Ms. Chun, Keating said, his voice cutting through the ambient conversation like a knife. A moment. Miranda turned, still trying to maintain that confident CEO smile, probably thinking he wanted to discuss terms or timeline or something normal that happens at successful funding pitches. Of course, Mr. Keating. I hope you. He held up the folder, and I watched her smile freeze mid-formation. I've been reviewing your documentation, he said, flipping it open. And I have some questions about your founding narrative. Never actually what? Keating turned to face Richard directly, and the old man actually took a step back. Never actually entitled to the equity he was granted? Because I have an email here. He pulled out another page, and I knew exactly which email it was because I provided it to Priya. From you, Mr. Chun, dated April 2019, thanking Jordan, our co-founder, for his invaluable contributions to building our core platform. Those are your words, correct? Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. No sound came out. Miranda tried to rally. Mr. Keating, I assure you all of our corporate structure is in order. Our lawyers have reviewed. Have they reviewed this? Keating pulled out the big guns now. A copy of the founder agreement, the one with the notary stamp, the one that legally gave me 22% of the IP. He held it up like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Because this is a signed, notarized agreement giving Jordan Hayes ownership of 22% of your core intellectual property. And unless I'm reading this wrong, and I've been reading corporate agreements for 40 years, so I doubt I am, this agreement was never superseded or invalidated. The silence in that ballroom was so complete you could have heard a stock option drop. Every investor in the room was now staring at Miranda and Richard like they'd just discovered the floor was actually made of quicksand. Sarachin spoke up. Are you saying there's an ownership dispute over the IP? I'm saying, Keating replied, his voice measured and deadly calm, that there appears to be a significant gap between the story we were just told and the documented reality of this company's founding. Ms. Chun just spent 20 minutes explaining how she built this platform herself. But the paperwork suggests she had a co-founder who owned a substantial portion of the technology, a co-founder she failed to mention in her presentation. He wasn't a co-founder, Miranda said desperately. He was an employee who? An employee you gave equity to? Keating asked. An employee your father called a co-founder in writing? An employee who, according to this termination agreement, was denied a $250,000 performance bonus due to restructuring 3 weeks before you started your Series B process. He looked around the room. Anyone else finding this timeline suspicious? Marcus Washington from Sequoia raised his hand like he was in a college seminar. So to be clear, the person who actually built the technology isn't here tonight and potentially still has a legal claim to a significant portion of your company's core assets? There is no legal claim, Miranda insisted, but her voice had lost all its confidence. She sounded like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. Jordan signed standard employment agreements that apparently didn't supersede his founder agreement, Keating finished. He closed the folder with a definitive snap that echoed through the silent ballroom. Ms. Chun, Mr. Chun, I've been in this business a long time. I've seen a lot of pitches, a lot of founders, a lot of companies. And you know what I've learned? Nobody answered. Everyone just stared. I've learned that when the paperwork and the story don't match up, it's the story that's usually wrong. He looked directly at Miranda. You just stood on that stage and told us you built this platform yourself, that you taught yourself software engineering in your garage, that this is your vision, your creation, your company. It is my company, Miranda said, but it came out as almost a whisper. Except, Keating continued, the person who actually built the platform, the person you erased from your website, your investor decks, your company history, still legally owns 22% of it. And more importantly, you lied about it. You looked a room full of investors in the eye and told us a story you knew wasn't true. He put the folder under his arm. That's called fraud, Ms. Chun, and it's the one thing I absolutely will not tolerate. The room went completely silent. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Everyone was frozen, watching this play out like it was a car crash happening in slow motion. Mr. Keating, Richard tried one more time, his voice cracking. If we could just discuss this privately, I'm sure we can. Can what? Keating's voice was ice. Explain why you fired your co-founder 3 months before your funding round. Explain why you rewrote your company's history to erase him from it. Explain why you withheld his earned bonus right before trying to raise $20 million. He shook his head. There's nothing to discuss. The due diligence is over. He looked around the room at the other investors. For anyone else considering putting money into this company, I strongly suggest you review these documents before writing any checks. Because right now, you're not investing in a company with clear ownership. You're investing in a lawsuit waiting to happen. Sarah Chun was already putting her phone away, her face professionally neutral, but her body language screaming, "Get me out of here." Marcus Washington was muttering something to his associate, who was frantically typing on his phone. Other investors were backing away from Miranda and Richard like they were radioactive. Keating turned back to Miranda one last time. "Congratulations, Miss CEO," he said, and his tone was so calm, so measured, so completely devastating. "You just lost your company." Then he walked out, just turned around and walked through the ballroom doors like he was leaving a restaurant after a disappointing meal, not like he'd just nuked a Series B funding round from orbit. The other investors followed. Not all at once. That would have been too dramatic, but in a steady stream over the next few minutes, all of them finding reasons to leave, excuses to make calls, urgent meetings to get to. The ballroom that had been full of promise and champagne and potential millions of dollars emptied like someone had pulled a fire alarm. Somewhere inside me, a choir started singing. Handel's Hallelujah Chorus, full orchestra, complete with triumphant trumpets. I tried not to laugh, tried to maintain some semblance of dignity, but oh my God, it was hard. Miranda stood in the center of the rapidly emptying ballroom, her face cycling through emotions faster than I could track them. Shock, denial, anger, panic. She looked like someone who'd just watched their entire world collapse and couldn't quite process it yet. Richard had collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. Tom, the CFO, was on his phone, probably calling their lawyers, probably trying to figure out how to spin this disaster into something salvageable. Miranda's face went white first, like someone had drained all the blood from her body. Then red, a deep crimson that started at her neck and spread up to her perfectly made-up face. Then, and this was my favorite part, a shade of purple I didn't even know existed on the human color spectrum. It was like watching a sunset. If sunsets were made of rage and consequences, and the dawning realization that you'd completely screwed yourself. Her mouth opened and closed several times. No words came out. She looked at her father, who couldn't meet her eyes. She looked at the empty chairs where millions of dollars had been sitting just minutes ago. She looked at the stage where she'd just delivered what she thought was the performance of her life. And then she saw me. Through the glass wall of the conference room, our eyes met across the space. I don't know if she recognized me at first. I was sitting in darkness, after all, just a silhouette in an empty room. But then I stood up, stepped closer to the glass where the light from the ballroom hit my face, and I smiled. Not a mean smile. Not a gloating smile. Just a calm, satisfied smile that said everything I needed to say. I told you this was just business. Her expression shifted to pure horror. Her hand came up, pointing at me, and she said something to her father. He looked up, saw me, and the little color left in his face drained away completely. I gave them a small wave. Just a little one, the kind you give to neighbors you don't particularly like. Then I turned and walked out of the conference room, through the empty corridors of the Grand Meridian, and out into the night air that had never smelled sweeter. Behind me, I could hear shouting. Miranda's voice, high and panicked, calling my name. Security's radio crackling. Footsteps running. But I was already gone. 2 days later, I got an email. Subject line, "We need to talk." It was from Richard's personal email, not his company one, which told me everything I needed to know about how desperate they were. When the chairman starts using his Gmail instead of his corporate account, you know things have gone from bad to, oh God, our lawyers told us to be careful about what we put in writing. The email itself was a masterpiece of restrained panic. Jordan, I hope we can discuss this situation like reasonable adults. I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the nature of your role at the company. Perhaps we could meet for coffee and clear this up? A misunderstanding. Right. We'd misunderstood our way right into me owning 22% of their intellectual property and them losing a $20 million funding round. Easy mistake to make. I forwarded it to Priya with a one-line message. Tell them I charge by the million. She called me 5 minutes later, laughing so hard she could barely talk. Oh my God, Jordan. Did you see Miranda's LinkedIn? No, why? She posted this whole thing about taking time to focus on personal growth and mental health. Which is rich person speak for, I'm hiding until this blows over. Is it going to blow over? Not even a little bit, Priya said cheerfully. I've had 3 of their investors call me already. They want to know if Nova Bridge is interested in buying them out, or if we're planning to sue, or basically what we want to make this nightmare go away for them. You've got them by the balls, my friend. Now we just need to figure out how hard to squeeze. We spent the next week in negotiations. And when I say negotiations, I mean a beautifully choreographed dance where they desperately tried to lowball me and I politely explained, over and over, that they had absolutely no leverage. Their first offer came through their corporate lawyer, a guy named Steven who sounded like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Mr. Hayes, my clients are prepared to offer you $200,000 for a full release of all claims against the company. I was sitting in my apartment when he called, eating cereal straight from the box because I'd run out of clean bowls. 200,000. I repeated, that's less than the bonus you already owe me. Thanks, but I'll pass. Mr. Hayes, I don't think you understand the position you're in. If this goes to court, it could take years and legal fees alone. Steven, can I call you Steven? I didn't wait for an answer. Steven, I don't think you understand the position your clients are in. They can't raise funding with a cloud over their IP ownership. They can't sell the company. They can't go public. They can't do anything except slowly watch their business die while I sit here eating Lucky Charms and watching Netflix. So unless your next number has at least 6 zeros in it, we're done here. I hung up. Priya texted me immediately. Did you just hang up on their lawyer? Seemed like the right move. I love you. Never change. The second offer came 2 days later, $500,000. I countered at $5 million. They came back at $1 million. We were getting closer, but they were still trying to pretend they had options. That's when Priya made her power move. She sent them a letter, on proper legal letterhead, the kind that costs like $300 a page, outlining exactly what would happen if we didn't reach an agreement. We'd file a lawsuit claiming ownership of the IP. We'd seek an injunction preventing them from using the platform until ownership was resolved. We'd notify all their current customers about the legal dispute. We'd contact every investor who'd ever given them money. Basically, we'd burn their company to the ground, legally and publicly, and there wouldn't be anything left but ashes and regrets. The letter ended with, "However, my client is willing to resolve this matter quickly and quietly for the fair market value of his ownership stake. We have calculated this at $4.2 million, based on the most recent valuation used in your Series B materials. This offer expires in 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days. That was another power move. Give them just enough time to panic, but not enough time to come up with a clever alternative. They tried to negotiate down. Of course they did. Tom, the CFO, called me directly, which was ballsy considering I'd never particularly liked him. Jordan, be reasonable. $4 million is a lot of money. We simply don't have that kind of cash on hand. Then get a loan, I suggested. Or sell something. Or maybe Miranda can teach herself finance the same way she taught herself software engineering. There's no need to be hostile. Tom, you watched them fire me in a glass conference room and said nothing. You helped them erase me from the company history. You stood there at that Series B pitch while Miranda lied to a room full of investors about who built what. So forgive me if I'm not super concerned about whether this is convenient for you." He was quiet for a moment. "We can do $3 million. Final offer. 4.2, I said. Non-negotiable. You've got," I checked my phone, 47 hours left. The next day, Danielle called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Jordan, please," she said, and she sounded like she'd been crying. "You're destroying my family." "I'm not destroying anything," I said calmly. "I'm just taking what's legally mine. What was always mine. What they stole, and then tried to pretend never existed. Miranda's a mess. She hasn't left her apartment in days. My dad's talking to bankruptcy lawyers." "That's unfortunate," I said, and I meant it. Not because I felt bad for them, but because it was unfortunate that they'd put themselves in this position through their own greed and stupidity. But it's not my problem to solve by accepting less than what I'm owed. We were married, Jordan. Doesn't that mean anything? We were married. Past tense. You sat in that conference room and watched them humiliate me. You knew what was happening. The erasure, the lies, all of it, and you said nothing. So no, Danielle, right now it doesn't mean much at all." I hung up, blocked her number. Some bridges you burn, and some bridges you nuke from orbit just to make sure they can never be rebuilt. With 24 hours left on the deadline, Richard himself called. Not his lawyer. Not Tom. Him. "Jordan," he said, and his voice sounded older, somehow tired. "I'm sorry. I'm truly, deeply sorry for what we did to you. You deserve better. You deserved credit, equity, respect. We were wrong." It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from any of them. It was also way too late. "I appreciate that," I said. "I really do. But an apology doesn't pay my rent or give me back the 3 years I spent building something you stole. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to pay me $4.2 million by 5 p.m. tomorrow, and then we never have to speak again. And if we can't, then I file the lawsuit Monday morning. And instead of this being a quiet settlement that nobody knows about, it becomes a very public legal battle that destroys whatever's left of your company's reputation. Your choice." He was quiet for a long time. "We'll have the money." They did. At 4:45 p.m. the next day, 15 minutes before the deadline, my bank account received a wire transfer for $4,200,000. I stared at my phone for a solid 5 minutes, refreshing my banking app over and over, because surely this couldn't be real. Surely I wasn't actually looking at 7 figures in my checking account. But I was. The money was real. The victory was real. The justice, delayed and hard-fought and absolutely satisfying, was real. Priya called immediately. "Did you get it?" "I got it." "How does it feel?" I thought about that. How did it feel? It felt like validation. It felt like proof that I hadn't been crazy, that my contributions had mattered, that you can't just erase someone and expect no consequences. It felt like 3 years of work finally getting recognized and paid for. It felt like justice. But mostly it felt like I could finally afford therapy to process all of this. "It feels pretty good," I told her. "It feels pretty damn good." We negotiated the paperwork over the next week. I signed away all claims to the company in exchange for the payment. They got full, uncontested ownership of the IP. Everyone got what they needed. They got to keep their company, and I got financially compensated for building it. The agreement included a mutual non-disparagement clause, which meant neither party could publicly trash the other. I was fine with that. I didn't need to trash them publicly. The fact that I'd won was enough. Miranda didn't show up at the signing, taking time to focus on her mental health, according to Tom, who did show up along with Richard and approximately 7,000 lawyers. We signed the papers in a conference room at their law firm's office, nobody making eye contact, everyone just wanting this to be over. When we finished, Richard tried to shake my hand. I looked at it for a moment, then stood up and walked out without a word. Some gestures don't deserve a response. Outside, the San Francisco sun was shining, and I pulled out my phone to check my account one more time. Still there. Still real. For $0.2 million, minus Priya's contingency fee and taxes, but still more money than I'd ever imagined having. I texted Kevin, "Want to get coffee? I'm buying." And by buying, I mean I can actually afford the fancy stuff now. He responded immediately, "Dude, did it work?" It worked. Holy shit. I quit this morning, by the way. Couldn't do it anymore after watching them scramble. I'm free next Tuesday if you want to talk about what's next. What was next? That was a good question. I had money now. Options. Freedom. The ability to do whatever I wanted without worrying about whether it would pay rent. I thought about starting my own company. Doing it right this time. Building something where people got credit for their work, where founders meant founders, where success was shared instead of stolen. But first, I was going to do something I hadn't done in 3 years, take a vacation. A real one. Somewhere expensive. Somewhere I'd always wanted to go but couldn't afford. I pulled up Tesla's website on my phone. Configured a Model S, Obsidian Black. All the upgrades. Clicked order. Then I called Priya. Lawyer friend of mine, just made me very rich. Want to help me celebrate? I thought you'd never ask. Where are we going? I don't know yet, I admitted. Somewhere they serve drinks with umbrellas and nobody knows who the hell Miranda Chin is. Perfect. I'll pack my bags. Justice doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's an email confirmation that hits your inbox at 4:45 on a Friday afternoon. Sometimes it's watching 7 digits appear in your bank account. Sometimes it's the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when they tried to erase you, you just rewrote yourself back into the story with a bigger role and better ending. The hoodie still hangs in my closet, right there between my good suits and the leather jacket I bought to celebrate becoming a millionaire. I kept it, which probably seems weird to people who know the story. Why keep a reminder of the worst day of your professional life? Why hang on to a piece of cheap promotional merchandise that was literally designed to humiliate you on your way out the door? But here's the thing. It's not a reminder of the worst day anymore. It's a trophy. It's a punchline. It's my favorite comedy prop, and I will never, ever get rid of it. I'm sitting in my new apartment, which is less of an apartment and more of a holy crap. I have a view of the Golden Gate Bridge from my living room situation, about 8 months after the settlement. The Tesla is parked downstairs in my assigned spot, the one that cost an extra 50 grand, but was totally worth it because it has an EV charger built in. Life is, to put it mildly, pretty good. Kevin's here too, sitting on my absurdly expensive couch that I bought purely because the salesperson said it was designed in collaboration with an award-winning architect, which apparently means it costs as much as a used car, but is shaped like a kidney bean. He's my co-founder now. We're building something new, something better, something where everyone who contributes actually gets credit and equity and treated like a human being instead of an erasable line item. You still have that thing? Kevin asks, pointing at the hoodie visible through my open closet door. Are you kidding? That hoodie is a historical artifact. That hoodie is going in a museum someday. The severance package that launched 1,000 lawsuits. There was only one lawsuit, and you didn't even file it. Details, I wave him off. The important thing is that hoodie represents a pivotal moment in tech history. The moment when corporate arrogance met its match. Kevin laughs, shaking his head. You're ridiculous. I'm rich and ridiculous, which is way better than being poor and ridiculous. Trust me, I've been both. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Priya. Dinner tomorrow? Need to discuss the new venture capital interest. Also, saw Miranda's LinkedIn. You're gonna love this. I immediately check LinkedIn because I'm petty and I've earned the right to be. Miranda's profile now lists her as advisor and consultant instead of CEO. Her header image has changed from a professional photo of her looking confident and powerful to some generic inspirational quote about resilience. Her recent post is about learning from setbacks and the importance of humility in leadership. I screenshot it and sent it to Kevin. Character development, I type. Too bad it took $4.2 million to unlock it. Think she learned anything? Kevin asks. Honestly, I don't know, and I don't really care. That's the beautiful part about winning. You don't have to care anymore. She's not my problem. She's not my responsibility. She's just someone I used to know who made some really bad decisions. I get up and walk to the closet, pull out the hoodie, and hold it up. It's been washed exactly once, the day after I got it, because it smelled like defeat and conference room air freshener. Now it just smells like regular detergent and victory. You know what the best part is? I say to Kevin, every single time I look at this thing, I remember exactly what she said. Here's a hoodie and a 50. Like that was supposed to be enough. Like 3 years of my life was worth less than a dinner at a mid-range restaurant. To be fair, Kevin points out, it was a pretty nice restaurant. $50 could get you appetizers and an entree if you ordered carefully. You're missing the point. No, I get the point. The point is they massively underestimated you, and it destroyed them. Exactly. I fold the hoodie carefully and put it back in the closet. The point is that they thought I was disposable. They thought they could rewrite history and I'd just disappear quietly into the night, grateful for whatever crumbs they threw my way. My doorbell rings. It's the food delivery, Thai food from this place that costs an unreasonable amount, but makes pad Thai that tastes like it was blessed by angels. I tip the delivery guy $40 because I can, because having money means you can make other people's days better, because I remember what it was like to count every dollar and stress about whether I could afford the good ramen or had to stick with the cheap stuff. Kevin and I settle in with our food, and he asks the question I've been getting a lot lately. So what's next? You've got money, you've got vindication, you've got a new company starting up. You won. What do you do after you win? I think about that while chewing a spring roll. What do you do after you win? After you've fought the battle, proven your point, gotten justice in the most tangible way possible? I build something better. I say finally. I build something where this can't happen to someone else. Where founders actually means founders. Where equity means equity. Where if you build something, you get credit for building it. You sound like a motivational poster. Maybe I am a motivational poster. A motivational poster with $4.2 million and a grudge that turned into a business plan. Richard Chun just endorsed me on LinkedIn for software architecture. The man who fired me, who erased me, who sat silently while his daughter rewrote history and pretended I never existed, just publicly acknowledged that I'm good at the thing I built his entire company on. I show Kevin, who literally spits out his Thai iced tea. Is he serious right now? I think it's an olive branch. I say, studying my phone like it's about to explode. I think it's his way of saying, I'm sorry, without actually having to say the words. Are you going to accept it? I hover my thumb over the remove button. I could delete this endorsement. I could block him. I could spend the next however many years making sure he knows I haven't forgiven him for what he did. Or I could just let it be. Let it exist as a weird, awkward acknowledgement that I was right and they were wrong. That history got corrected even if it took $4.2 million to do it. I close LinkedIn without removing the endorsement. You know what? Let him endorse me. Let it sit there on my profile as proof that even he had to eventually admit the truth. That's very mature of you. I'm growing as a person. Money does that to you. Makes you magnanimous. Kevin raises his Thai iced tea. To being magnanimous. I clink my beer bottle against his glass. To being magnanimous. And to hoodies that cost companies millions of dollars. A few weeks later, I run into Blake. Blake Chun, no relation to Richard and Miranda, thank God, who took over as CEO after Miranda's mental health break became a permanent resignation. We meet for coffee at this hipster place in Mission District that serves lattes with foam art so complicated it seems like a waste to drink them. I wanted to thank you, Blake says, stirring his overpriced beverage. You know, for not completely destroying the company. You could have. You had every right to burn it all down. Thought about it, I admit. But then I realized there were like 40 employees there who had nothing to do with what happened. People just trying to do their jobs and pay their mortgages. Didn't seem fair to nuke their livelihoods because I was mad at the founders. That's surprisingly reasonable. Don't spread that around. I have a reputation as a vengeful tech genius to maintain. Blake laughs. Listen, I know there's bad blood, obviously. But the platform you built is solid. Really solid. We're growing. We're profitable. We're doing good work. And everyone there knows you built it. I made sure of that. Your name's back on the website, back in the credits, back in the company history where it belongs. I pull up their website on my phone. Sure enough, there's a whole section now, our history. And right there, in the second paragraph, is my name. Co-founded by Richard Chun and Jordan Hayes in 2019, the company started with a simple vision. It's not everything. It's not an apology or a time machine that lets me go back and prevent the whole mess. But it's something. It's the truth, finally, in writing, where everyone can see it. Thanks, I tell Blake. That actually means a lot. We're working on some new features, he continues. Really innovative stuff. And I thought, maybe you'd want to consult? Paid, obviously. Fair rate. No equity drama. No founder disputes. Just you helping us build something cool. I consider it. Part of me wants to say no out of principle, to maintain the grudge, to never work with that company again in any capacity. But another part of me, the part that actually enjoys building things, that misses the technical challenges, that remembers what it was like when the work was just about the work, is intrigued. Send me the specs, I say. I'll think about it. Fair enough. We shake hands, and I realize this is closure. Real closure. Not the legal kind that comes with settlement agreements and non-disparagement clauses, but the human kind where you move forward because staying angry is exhausting and life is too short to spend it nursing grudges that have already been settled. That night, I'm back in my apartment, and I walk over to the closet one more time. Look at the hoodie hanging there, this ridiculous piece of corporate merchandise that was supposed to be an insult, but became a symbol of something else entirely. Hey, old friend, I say to it, because I'm alone and talking to clothing is apparently what I do now. Thanks for the $4.2 million. And I mean it. That hoodie was supposed to be a humiliation, a final insult, a cheap consolation prize for someone they'd used up and thrown away. Instead, it became a reminder. A reminder that when people underestimate you, when they think you're not smart enough or angry enough or persistent enough to fight back, that's when you have the advantage. My wife, ex-wife now, the divorce finalized about a month after the settlement, tried to apologize again last week. Called me out of nowhere, said Miranda, didn't mean it that way, said the family was going through a hard time, said maybe we could try again. I kept the response simple, don't worry. I didn't mean it that way either when I took back what was mine. Then I hung up and blocked her number for good this time. Some chapters end, and you don't need to keep rereading them. Justice doesn't always come with fireworks, I've learned. It doesn't always look like the movies where the hero gives a big speech and everyone claps and learns an important lesson about morality. Sometimes justice is quiet. Sometimes it's just an email confirmation that hits your inbox at 3:47 in the afternoon, telling you that the wire transfer went through, that the numbers in your account are real, that you won. Sometimes justice is a hoodie in your closet that was supposed to humiliate you, but ended up funding your next venture. Sometimes justice is knowing that when they tried to erase you, you just rewrote the story with yourself as the protagonist instead of the footnote. And sometimes, justice is just being able to order Thai food without checking the prices first, tip generously, drive a Tesla, and sleep well at night knowing that truth is more expensive than lies, but it's worth every penny. The hoodie stays in the closet, not hidden away in shame, but displayed proudly. A reminder that no matter how much someone tries to diminish your worth, you get to decide your own value. And my value, as it turns out, was $4.2 million plus interest, a successful new company, and the satisfaction of watching people who thought they were untouchable learn a very expensive lesson about hubris. Not bad for a guy who once got fired with promotional merchandise and a gift card. Not bad at all. My wife spent the night out with her male co-workers. She came back at 4 a.m. and whispered, "Don't ask, I didn't." But when she saw who was sitting in our living room, the next morning her jaw dropped. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was some kind of insomniac prophet who saw this coming from miles away. But let me tell you, when your wife stumbles through the front door at 4:03 in the morning looking like she just escaped from a perfume factory that exploded in a martini bar, you don't need a PhD in marital psychology to know something's rotten in the state of your bedroom. I wasn't asleep. Hell, I hadn't been asleep for about 3 hours at that point, and not because I was waiting up like some paranoid sitcom husband with trust issues and a drinking problem. No, I was wide awake because I'd already done the math, connected the dots, and basically solved this mystery faster than those nerds on CSI figure out who touched the doorknob. The click of the door was subtle, real subtle, like she thought she was some kind of ninja assassin who'd mastered the ancient art of not waking up her clueless husband. Spoiler alert, I heard everything. The fumbling with keys that sounded like she was trying to break into Fort Knox with a spoon, the whispered curse word when she dropped something, probably her dignity, and then that theatrical tiptoe across the hardwood floor like she was auditioning for a heist movie nobody asked for. I kept my eyes closed, played dead like a possum at a highway rest stop, and just listened to the symphony of bad choices unfolding in my living room. When she finally made it past the couch, which, by the way, is where I'd been posted up since midnight watching Kevin O'Leary tear apart some poor soul's cupcake business on Shark Tank reruns, I cracked one eye open just enough to catch the full picture. And brother, it was a Picasso of disaster. Mira had her heels dangling from one hand like trophies from a night she'd never admit to. Her blazer was half on and half off in a way that screamed, I got dressed in an Uber. And her hair looked like it had been styled by a ceiling fan set to hurricane. But here's the kicker, the real chef's kiss of this whole production. She was whispering to herself. Actually whispering the words, don't ask, like she was rehearsing her defense strategy or practicing some kind of reverse psychology magic spell that would wipe my memory clean. Don't ask. That's what she muttered as she floated past me. And I'm using the word floated generously here because it was more like a drunk penguin trying to ice skate uphill. She thought I was asleep. She genuinely believed I'd just snore through this Oscar-worthy performance like I always did. Like some oblivious husband character from a bad rom-com who doesn't notice his wife coming home smelling like a cologne convention had a baby with a liquor cabinet. But here's the thing about assumptions. They make an ass out of you and, well, just you in this case, Mira. The smell hit me before she even made it to the hallway. Now, I'm not some bloodhound with a supernatural sense of smell or anything, but when your wife comes home reeking of expensive cologne that definitely doesn't come from the discount rack at Target where I buy my deodorant, you notice. This wasn't her usual scent, that vanilla lavender combo she'd worn since we got married, the one that smelled like responsible adulting and Sunday morning pancakes. No, this was something with notes of I make six figures, and I definitely own a yacht, or at least know someone who does. It was the kind of cologne that comes in a bottle shaped like a geometric nightmare and costs more than my car payment. And I definitely, absolutely, 100% did not own anything that smelled like that. I watched her disappear down the hallway toward our bedroom, moving with the confidence of someone who thinks they've pulled off the perfect crime. She probably figured she'd shower, climb into bed, and tomorrow morning we'd do our usual dance of me asking, how was your night? And her responding with some vague corporate word salad about networking events and team bonding exercises that sounded more like euphemisms from a very specific genre of late-night cable programming. She'd gotten away with it before, or at least she thought she had. All those late nights at the office, those weekend team-building retreats that somehow never included spouses, those emergency conference calls at 9 p.m. on a Friday that apparently required her to leave the house fully made up with heels and that dress she saved for special occasions. But here's what Mira didn't know, couldn't have known, because she was too busy living in her little bubble of terrible decisions and worse excuses. I'd been awake for hours. Not just tonight, but metaphorically, you know? Like, I'd woken up from this whole marriage coma about 2 weeks ago when I found a receipt in her jacket pocket from some restaurant I'd never heard of, the Velvet Spoon, which sounds less like a place where people eat dinner and more like a location where murders happen in mystery novels. The receipt was for 2 entrees, 2 desserts, and a bottle of wine that cost more than our first date, second date, and third date combined. And before you ask, no, I wasn't invited to this little culinary adventure. I was at home that night eating leftover Chinese food and watching a documentary about penguins, ironically enough. So yeah, I'd been doing my homework. I'd been paying attention to the patterns, the little inconsistencies in her stories, the way she'd started password protecting her phone like it contained nuclear launch codes, the mysterious work trips that seemed to coincide with her boss's schedule. I wasn't some jealous psycho tracking her every move. I was just a guy who'd finally decided to trust his gut instead of the woman who used to be my best friend before she became a stranger who shared my mortgage. Don't ask, she'd said, like those two words were some kind of magical incantation that would make me forget how to think critically or notice obvious red flags the size of Texas. Don't ask where you were. Don't ask who you were with. Don't ask why you smell like a Sephora exploded in a gentleman's club. Just don't ask, and we can all pretend everything's fine. That our marriage isn't slowly turning into one of those true crime podcasts where everyone listening at home is screaming at the husband to wake up and smell the infidelity. Well, joke's on her, because I wasn't planning to ask. Asking would require me to pretend I didn't already know the answer, and I'm way too tired for that level of performance art. Asking would give her the opportunity to lie to my face again, to spin some elaborate tale about how Brent from accounting just needed someone to talk to about his divorce, and they lost track of time and whoops, didn't realize it was 4 a.m. Asking would ruin the surprise I had planned, the beautiful, carefully orchestrated karma bomb I'd been assembling in my head, while Mr. Wonderful told some entrepreneur that their business model was dead on arrival. No, I wasn't going to ask her anything. I was just going to sit here in the dark, on my couch, in my house, sipping my cold coffee and mentally drafting the exit strategy that would make Sun Tzu look like an amateur. Because if there's one thing I learned from 17 seasons of Shark Tank, it's that you need to know when to cut your losses and walk away from a bad investment. And brother, this marriage had become the worst investment of my life. No returns, terrible partners, an evaluation that kept dropping faster than my self-respect every time she walked through that door smelling like someone else's life. I listened to the shower turn on, because of course she needed to wash away the evidence like some criminal mastermind who learned everything she knows from watching How to Get Away with Murder. I imagined her standing under the hot water, probably feeling relieved that she'd made it home without confrontation, without consequences, without having to face the music that was about to drop like a beat at a rave she definitely wasn't invited to. Don't ask, I whispered to myself in the dark, mimicking her voice. Don't ask, I repeated, and then I smiled. Not a happy smile, but that cold, calculated smile you get when you realize you're about to win a game the other person doesn't even know they're playing. Because tomorrow was going to be very, very interesting. Tomorrow, I was going to start making phone calls. Tomorrow, the fun would really begin. And Mira, sweet, careless, cologne-soaked Mira, had absolutely no idea what was coming. By 7 a.m, I was sitting at our kitchen table. Well, technically it's still our table, but let's be honest. After last night's performance, I was already mentally dividing assets in my head like some divorce attorney who charges $400 an hour, drinking black coffee. Not the fancy kind with oat milk and caramel drizzle and whatever other Instagram-worthy garbage people pretend tastes good. No, I'm talking straight-up black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just pure bitter darkness that matched my mood and my newfound clarity about this absolute dumpster fire of a marriage. If coffee could talk, this cup would have been giving me a standing ovation for finally waking up and smelling the betrayal. Mira was still sleeping in, which is married person code for hiding under the covers and hoping yesterday's terrible decisions somehow evaporated overnight like they were written in disappearing ink. I could hear her phone buzzing from the bedroom every few minutes. Probably Brent checking in to make sure his little secret was still safe. Probably sending some cowardly text like, "Did he suspect anything?" Or, "We should probably cool it for a while," like they were teenagers sneaking around behind the bleachers instead of grown adults torching a marriage with the emotional intelligence of houseplants. The house itself was basically screaming evidence at me louder than a prosecutor on one of those courtroom TV shows my mom watches religiously. I'm talking about clues so obvious that even Scooby-Doo could have solved this mystery without Velma's help, and that dog survives on literal snacks and cowardice. First up, 2 wine glasses in the sink. Now, before you jump in with, maybe she had a friend over, let me stop you right there, because Mira doesn't have friends who visit at midnight on a Tuesday. Her friends are all married with kids and mortgages and bedtimes that would make senior citizens look like party animals. These glasses still had lipstick on the rim. One shade I recognized as hers, that mauve color she bought from Sephora and won't shut up about, and another shade that definitely wasn't from any makeup bag in this house. Strike one. Then there was the missing phone charger situation. See, We've got this basket on the kitchen counter where we keep all our charging cables because Myra's one of those organizationally obsessed people who labels everything like we're running a small business out of our living room instead of just, living. Her work laptop charger was there. Her iPad cable was there. But her iPhone charger, the white Apple one she guards with her life because she claims the off-brand ones ruin the battery, even though I've tried explaining that's not how electricity works, was gone. Vanished. Probably sitting on some nightstand that isn't mine, charging next to a phone that's been texting my wife messages I'm definitely not supposed to see. And the perfume. Oh man, the perfume. I'm not exaggerating when I say you could have fumigated a small moose with the amount of scent lingering in our entryway. It was everywhere. On the coat rack, hovering near the couch, probably embedded in the carpet fibers like some kind of aromatic crime scene evidence. This wasn't her usual smell, and it definitely wasn't mine unless I'd suddenly started moonlighting as a cologne model who shops exclusively at stores where they greet you with champagne. This was expensive. This was deliberate. This was the olfactory equivalent of a signed confession. But here's where it gets really good, folks, where my inner detective decided to upgrade from suspicious husband to forensic accountant with a vendetta. I opened our shared banking app because nothing says healthy marriage built on trust and communication quite like joint checking accounts and matching debit cards that track each other's spending habits like some dystopian surveillance system we willingly signed up for. I know, some of you are probably thinking that's an invasion of privacy, and you're absolutely right. Except we both agreed to this setup 3 years ago when Mira convinced me it would help us budget better and stay financially transparent. Well, transparency works both ways, sweetheart. I scrolled through yesterday's transactions with the dedication of an IRS agent who suspects tax fraud and really needs a win this quarter. Coffee at Starbucks, 7:15 in the morning. Okay, normal. Lunch at that salad place she loves because apparently eating leaves makes you morally superior. Fine, whatever. Gas station, 3:30 p.m., boring but necessary. And then, right there at 11:47 p.m., like a neon sign flashing, your wife is a lying liar who lies. A charge for $173 at a place called the Velvet Spoon. The Velvet Spoon. Let me paint you a picture of this establishment, because I looked it up immediately on Google like any self-respecting husband who's about to become single would do. This isn't some casual Applebee's where you go for half-price appetizers and questionable margaritas. This isn't even one of those mid-tier chain restaurants with the fake Italian names and the unlimited breadsticks. No, the Velvet Spoon is one of those upscale lounges downtown where the appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery budget and the drinks come with fancy ice cubes that are somehow artisanal. It's got mood lighting that's permanently stuck on romantic ambience, leather booths that have definitely seen some questionable decisions, and a menu that describes everything in French because apparently English isn't pretentious enough. According to Myra's previous explanations about this place, because yes, she's mentioned it before in her carefully constructed web of lies. This is where her male co-workers just hang out after projects to decompress and network. Just hang out. Just decompress. Just network. Right. And I just hang out at Ferrari dealerships on Saturday afternoons because I enjoy the free Wi-Fi and the leather smell, not because I'm fantasizing about a life where I can afford things that cost more than my kidneys are worth on the black market. $173. At midnight. On a Tuesday. For what exactly? Let me do the math here, because I've got nothing but time and spite fueling my calculations right now. That's probably 2 overpriced entrees at about $40 each. Maybe some appetizers because you can't just sit at a fancy restaurant without ordering the truffle fries or whatever gentrified nonsense they're pushing, and definitely a bottle of wine. Not a glass, a bottle, because nothing says purely professional relationship like sharing fermented grapes that cost more than most people's car insurance. I sat there staring at that transaction like it was some kind of abstract art I was trying to interpret, except the meaning was pretty damn clear and it wasn't open to subjective interpretation. My wife had spent almost $200 at a romantic restaurant at midnight with someone who wasn't me, then came home at 4 in the morning smelling like a cologne commercial and telling me not to ask questions. This wasn't rocket science. This wasn't even community college science. This was elementary school detective book level obvious. The best part? The transaction showed it was paid with our joint account. Not her personal credit card, not some secret stash of cash she'd been hiding. Our money. The money we both worked for. The money that was supposed to go toward our mortgage and our bills and our theoretical future together. She'd taken our shared funds and used them to finance her little romantic escapade like some kind of financial infidelity double whammy. It was almost impressive in its audacity, like watching someone rob a bank and then asking the teller for a receipt. I screenshot the transaction, saved it, backed it up to 3 different cloud services because I've seen enough TV shows to know that evidence has a way of mysteriously disappearing when you need it most. Then I opened up a new note on my phone and started documenting everything. The time she came home, the cologne smell, the wine glasses, the missing charger, the velvet spoon charge. I wrote it all down with the methodical precision of someone building a case, because that's exactly what I was doing. This wasn't anger. Well, okay, it was definitely anger, but it was organized anger. Strategic anger. The kind of anger that makes spreadsheets and takes notes and doesn't just flip tables like some reality TV star having a meltdown. From the bedroom, I heard movement. She was waking up, probably checking her phone, probably seeing texts from Brent or whoever else was involved in this circus. I could picture her lying there, rehearsing her story, preparing her excuses, maybe even convincing herself that she hadn't done anything wrong, that this was somehow my fault for not being attentive enough or exciting enough, or whatever justification cheaters tell themselves to sleep at night. I poured myself another cup of coffee and smiled. Not a happy smile. I was way past happy at this point, but that cold, calculated smile you get when you're holding all the cards and the other players don't even know the game has started. Mira thought she was so clever, so careful, so good at covering her tracks. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. She'd assumed I was the same oblivious husband I'd been for the past year. The guy who nodded and smiled and believed every word she said. But that guy? He died somewhere around 4:03 this morning. And the person sitting here drinking bitter coffee and screenshot banking transactions? He was someone new. Someone who was done being played. Someone who was about to flip this entire script and watch the dominoes fall exactly where he wanted them to. Game on, Mira. Game on. So here's the thing about rage. When it's fresh and hot, it makes you do stupid things like punch walls or send texts you can't take back or eat an entire pizza by yourself at 3 in the morning while crying to Adele's songs. But when you let it simmer overnight, when you let it cool down and crystallize into something sharp and purposeful, that's when it becomes dangerous. That's when it becomes useful. And sitting there at my kitchen table with my second cup of nuclear-grade black coffee and a phone full of screenshots that could end a marriage faster than you can say irreconcilable differences, I was feeling pretty damn dangerous. I scrolled through my contacts like I was browsing a menu at a restaurant, except instead of picking between burgers and tacos, I was deciding whose life I wanted to ruin first. Okay, that sounds harsh. I wasn't trying to ruin anyone's life. I just wanted the truth. And maybe a little bit of satisfaction. And definitely the look on Brent's face when he realized he'd been caught with his hand in the cookie jar, except the cookie jar was my wife, and this metaphor was getting away from me, but you get the point. Brent Henderson. Team lead Brent, as Mira always called him with this weird mixture of respect, and something else I couldn't quite identify, but now realized was probably attraction disguised as professional admiration. She talked about this guy constantly. Brent says we should pivot our strategy. Brent thinks I should lead the next presentation. Brent gave me really great feedback on my quarterly report. I'd heard the name Brent so many times in the past 6 months that I was starting to think she'd forgotten mine. And here's the kicker. She always described him as just a friend who gives great feedback. Like he was some kind of corporate life coach instead of what he actually was, which was apparently the guy she was staying out until 4 in the morning with while spending my money on overpriced wine. I found his number in my phone. Yeah, I had his number because Mira had given it to me months ago in case of emergency, and I needed to reach her through work. The irony wasn't lost on me. This definitely qualified as an emergency, just not the kind she'd been thinking of when she programmed his contact info into my phone with a little briefcase emoji next to his name like he was some kind of professional connection instead of a home wrecker in a button-down shirt. It was 8:30 in the morning. Early enough that he'd be awake, but late enough that he couldn't claim he was still sleeping and couldn't talk. Perfect timing for an ambush, really. I hit the call button before I could overthink it, and listened to it ring once, twice, 3 times. For a second, I thought he might not answer. Maybe he'd seen my name on his caller ID and panicked. Maybe he was too busy deleting incriminating texts or Googling what to do when your affair partner's husband calls you. But then he picked up. Hello? His voice sounded rough, scratchy, like he'd gargled gravel for breakfast. Hungover. The man was definitely hungover, and somehow that made me smile because it meant last night had been exactly what I thought it was. Oh hey man, he continued when I didn't immediately respond, probably trying to sound casual and failing miserably. Mirror around. Mirror around. Like we were college roommates, and he was calling to see if his buddy could come out and play. Like he hadn't been out with her until 4 in the goddamn morning doing God knows what at a restaurant that probably has sommeliers and cloth napkins and waiters who describe the specials in voices that sound like they're narrating nature documentaries. I took a slow sip of my coffee, let the silence stretch out just long enough to make it uncomfortable. Nope, I said finally, keeping my voice light and friendly like we were talking about the weather or sports scores or anything other than the fact that he'd been playing hide the salami with my wife. But sounds like you two had fun at the Velvet Spoon. Dead silence. And I mean dead. Like, if silence could die and then have a funeral and then be buried 6 feet under. That's how dead this silence was. I could literally hear him stop breathing on the other end of the line. Could practically hear his brain short-circuiting as it tried to compute how I knew about the restaurant. What else I knew. Whether he should confess or deny, or just hang up and change his name and move to Canada where my jurisdiction presumably didn't reach. You could hear his soul buffering. Like watching a computer try to load a program that's too big for its processor. Just that spinning wheel of death going round and round while everything freezes. It was beautiful, honestly. If I could have bottled that silence and sold it, I could have retired. He stammered, and I imagined him sitting there in his probably expensive apartment with his probably expensive coffee maker and his probably expensive guilt, trying to figure out what lie would work here, what excuse would make this okay. It was just team bonding. Team bonding. Team bonding. This man really looked at his options, surveyed all the possible responses he could give, and landed on team bonding, like that was somehow going to fly. Like I was going to hear those 2 words and suddenly forget that team bonding happens at bowling alleys and mini golf courses and maybe office happy hours that end at 7 p.m., not at midnight at restaurants where the appetizers cost more than most people's monthly Netflix subscription. I smiled. Couldn't help it, really. The audacity was almost impressive. Right? I said, my voice dripping with enough sarcasm to fill an Olympic-sized pool. I'm sure it was a very collaborative project. I stretched out the word collaborative like I was savoring it, let it hang in the air between us loaded with all the implications I wasn't saying out loud. Because here's the thing, I didn't need to spell it out. He knew exactly what I was implying. He knew that I knew. And now he knew that I knew that he knew. And we were caught in this weird loop of knowing things that made the whole conversation feel like some kind of psychological thriller where everyone's playing chess except one person doesn't realize they're already in checkmate. Listen, man, I can explain, he started, but I cut him off. Can you though? I asked, still sipping my coffee like I had all the time in the world and zero concerns about where this conversation was going. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty straightforward. Expensive restaurant, late night, my wife coming home at 4 a.m. smelling like your cologne. I mean, I'm no detective, but even I can connect those dots, and I barely passed geometry in high school. Another pause. Shorter this time, but somehow more desperate. I could hear him breathing faster now, could picture him running his hands through his hair or loosening his tie or doing whatever stressed-out corporate dudes do when they realize they've been caught doing something that could get them fired, divorced if he's married, which I suddenly realized I didn't even know and didn't care, and definitely blacklisted from the husband community. It wasn't. He was really struggling here, and part of me, a small, petty part that I'm not particularly proud of, but also not particularly ashamed of, was enjoying watching him squirm through the phone line. Look, you've got the wrong idea about. Do I? I interrupted again, because honestly his excuses were boring me and I had other calls to make. Because my wrong idea includes bank statements, timestamps, and physical evidence. So unless you're about to tell me that you and Miro were actually conducting a very thorough market research project that required wine pairings, and perfume testing. I think my idea is pretty accurate. Silence again. But this time it was different. This was the silence of surrender, of a man who'd run out of lies and excuses and was finally facing the reality that he'd been caught. I could practically feel his panic through the phone, could imagine him calculating how bad this was going to get, whether I was going to tell his boss, whether I was going to do something crazy. Spoiler alert, I wasn't going to do anything crazy. I was going to do something calculated, which is actually way scarier. I have to go, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I said, smiling into my coffee cup. I figured you might. Oh, and Brent, you might want to update your LinkedIn, because something tells me your collaborative working relationship with Mira is about to get a lot less collaborative. He hung up. Didn't say goodbye, didn't try to explain further, just clicked off like his phone had suddenly become radioactive. The call ended with that little beep that sounded weirdly final, like the closing bell at a boxing match or the gavel at a trial. Round one me. Knockout. Also me. I set my phone down on the table and stared at it for a second, feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but wasn't quite anger either. It was more like clarity, purpose. The first domino had fallen, and I could already see how the rest of them were going to tumble down in this beautiful, terrible chain reaction that I was orchestrating from my kitchen table in my pajamas while drinking coffee that tasted like liquid revenge. From the bedroom, I heard the shower turn off. Mira would be getting ready soon, probably putting on her work clothes and her work face and all the other armor she wore to pretend everything was fine. She'd come out here eventually, kiss me on the cheek like nothing happened, maybe ask what I wanted for dinner like we were still playing house instead of starring in the world's most predictable infidelity drama. But I wasn't done making calls. Not even close. Because if there's one thing I learned from watching too many crime documentaries at 2 in the morning, it's that you need more than one witness, more than one piece of evidence, more than one domino falling. You need a whole cascade. You need overwhelming proof. You need the kind of ammunition that leaves no room for denial or excuses or it wasn't what it looked like. I pulled up another contact in my phone. One Mira had no idea still existed, one she'd forgotten about because she'd gotten too comfortable, too careless, too confident that she'd covered all her bases. I smiled again, that cold, calculated smile that was becoming my new default expression, and started dialing. The game wasn't just on anymore. The game was about to go nuclear. The second call I made wasn't to some coworker or mutual friend or anyone in Myra's immediate orbit. No, I was thinking bigger, way bigger. I scrolled past about 50 contacts until I landed on the name that made me smile for the first time all morning with something that actually resembled genuine happiness instead of that bitter, vengeful satisfaction I'd been running on since 4 a.m. Uncle Ray. Detective Raymond Cooper, retired, legend, absolute menace to criminals and family drama alike, and the only person in my contact list who'd probably been waiting his entire retirement for someone to call him with a problem this juicy. Let me tell you about Uncle Ray, because the man deserves his own true crime podcast. He spent 32 years with the Metro Police Department, made detective at 28, which apparently was some kind of record, and spent the next 3 decades solving everything from burglaries to homicides with the kind of success rate that made his colleagues either worship him or hate him, depending on whether they were on his team or competing for promotions. He retired 5 years ago at 55 because he said he'd seen enough of humanity's garbage to last 3 lifetimes and wanted to spend his golden years fishing and not getting shot at, which seemed like reasonable life goals, honestly. But here's the thing about Uncle Ray, retirement didn't retire him. The man still thought like a detective, still talked like a detective, still walked around his house wearing reading glasses attached to those door keychains like he was constantly ready to investigate something. He treated every family gathering like a cold case, asking questions about everyone's lives with the kind of intensity that made Thanksgiving dinner feel like an interrogation. "How's work, Stephen?" wasn't just small talk. It was an opening statement. "You seem stressed lately," wasn't concern. It was him gathering evidence. The man couldn't turn it off even if he wanted to, and honestly, I don't think he wanted to. I hit his contact, and he picked up on the first ring. Of course he did. It was 8:45 a.m. on a Wednesday, which for normal retirees meant coffee and morning news, but for Uncle Ray meant he'd already been awake for 3 hours, gone for a run, read 2 newspapers, and was probably halfway through organizing his tackle box or whatever detective-obsessed retirees do with their free time. "Morning, Ray," I said, trying to sound casual and probably failing because my voice had that edge to it that happens when you've been awake too long and consumed too much caffeine and discovered your wife's been cheating on you. "Morning." His voice came through the speaker like gravel in a blender, rough and direct, and completely devoid of the polite cushioning most people use in conversations. "It's 7:45, that's brunch time for drama. What happened? See, this is why I loved Uncle Ray. No, how are you doing? No, what's new?" Just straight to the point like he already knew I wasn't calling to chat about the weather or his tomato garden or whatever wholesome topics normal uncles discuss with their nephews. He could smell a problem through the phone line, and he was already putting on his detective hat before I'd even explained the situation. I told him everything. The 4:03 a.m. entrance, the cologne that could knock out a small army, the wine glasses, the missing charger, the velvet spoon charge, the phone call with Brent that went about, as well as a lead balloon at a helium convention. I laid it all out like I was giving a deposition, and he listened without interrupting once, which, if you knew Uncle Ray, was basically the equivalent of other people giving you a standing ovation. The man had opinions about everything, but when someone was telling him a story, he shut up and listened like his life depended on it. When I finished, there was a pause. Not an uncomfortable silence like with Brent, but more like the pause you hear in movies right before the mentor figure says something profound that changes the whole trajectory of the hero's journey. I could practically hear him processing, connecting dots, building a mental file folder labeled Myra's infidelity, the evidence. Then he whistled, long and low, the kind of whistle that means, "Oh, buddy, you're in it now." "So you want me to tell her?" he asked, and I could hear the excitement in his voice barely contained beneath his gruff exterior. This was what he lived for now. The chase, the investigation, the satisfaction of catching someone in a lie. Retirement had probably been boring him to death, and I'd just handed him a case on a silver platter. "No," I said, because as much as I loved the mental image of Uncle Ray following Mira around town like some kind of geriatric spy movie, that wasn't what I needed. "I just want to know how to stage poetic karma without going to jail." He chuckled, and it sounded like a lawnmower trying to start. "So you want results, not revenge." "Exactly," I said, warming up to this conversation more by the second. "Quiet, clean, maybe just emotionally devastating enough that she understands the consequences of her actions without me having to actually commit any felonies." He laughed so hard he started coughing. That deep, wheezy cough that happens when retired detectives who probably smoked too many cigarettes during stakeouts find something genuinely hilarious. When he finally caught his breath, I could hear him wheezing out words between chuckles. "You always were the polite assassin of the family," he said, and I could picture him shaking his head with that mix of pride and amusement he usually reserved for when someone did something clever but slightly illegal. "Your mother raised you too nice, but you got that Cooper mean streak buried deep down. I like it. So you'll help?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer because Uncle Ray would rather die than turn down an opportunity to solve a mystery, especially one that involved family and catching bad guys, or in this case, bad wives and their sketchy coworkers. "Help? Kid, I'm already planning this out like a military operation. Give me 2 hours. He paused, and I could hear paper rustling in the background like he was already taking notes. "Actually, scratch that. I'll come by tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. sharp. Don't eat breakfast. I'm bringing donuts because apparently that's what detectives do in movies, and I've never actually done it during my entire career, so we're doing this right. Plus, we're going to need the sugar for energy because what I'm planning is going to take some time." "What are you planning exactly?" I asked, suddenly both excited and terrified because Uncle Ray's plans had a tendency to be either brilliant or completely insane with very little middle ground. "A surprise," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Let's just say I've got some resources you don't know about, some connections that still owe me favors, and 32 years of experience making guilty people squirm. You want poetic justice? I'm about to compose you a whole symphony. Ray, you can't do anything illegal," I said, feeling like I needed to establish some ground rules before this spiraled into something that would make us both feature prominently in a true crime documentary. "Who said anything about illegal?" He sounded offended, which probably meant he was already planning something that existed in that gray area between legal and technically not prosecutable. Everything I do is by the book. It's just that I've read a lot of books, and some of them have very interesting chapters most people skip over. Before I could ask what that meant, he continued. Listen, here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., your place. I'm bringing donuts, coffee. The good stuff, not that gas station garbage, and a folder. You're going to love this folder. It's going to have everything we need to make sure Mira and her little boyfriend understand that actions have consequences, and also that you don't mess with a Cooper family member, because we're petty, we're organized, and we've got too much free time. What's in the folder? I asked, genuinely curious now. Evidence, documentation, photographs if we're lucky, and a plan so beautiful it should be hanging in an art museum. But I'm not spoiling it over the phone. This reveal deserves an in-person audience. He paused again. Oh, and one more thing. Does Mira know I'm retired law enforcement? Yeah, I think I mentioned it at our wedding, I said, remembering the reception where Uncle Ray had cornered half the guests with stories about his most interesting cases until my mother begged him to stop scaring Myra's relatives. Perfect. So she knows I've got resources, training, and absolutely no qualms about using both. He sounded positively gleeful now. This is going to be good. This is going to be real good. I haven't had this much fun since I caught that city councilman embezzling from the parks department. You remember that? Made the front page. Got a commendation. Good times. Ray, I just want her to know that I know and that there are consequences. I don't need a front page scandal, I said, trying to rein this in before it became the talk of the entire metropolitan area. Right, low profile. I got it, he said in a tone that suggested he absolutely did not got it and was already planning something that would be the opposite of low profile. Look, trust me on this. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. We're something comfortable because we're going to be setting up a show, and shows require preparation. Also, clear your schedule for the morning. Actually, clear it for the whole day. This is going to be an event. What kind of event? I asked, feeling like I was signing up for something without reading the terms and conditions. The kind where everyone learns a valuable lesson about honesty, fidelity, and why you don't cheat on someone whose uncle spent 3 decades interrogating people for a living. He chuckled again. Oh, and one more thing. Does Mira have anywhere she needs to be tomorrow morning? She usually leaves for work around 8:30, I said. Tell her you need her home by 9. Make up some excuse. Broken dishwasher, contractor coming, whatever. Just get her there. Trust me. And here's the thing, I did trust him. Maybe that made me crazy. Maybe it made me vindictive. Maybe it made me the kind of person my mother would be disappointed in at the next family gathering. But I didn't care. Uncle Ray had never steered me wrong before, and something about the confidence in his voice made me believe that whatever he was planning would be exactly what this situation needed. Okay, I said. 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll make sure she's here. Attaboy, he said, and I could hear him already moving around, probably pulling out old case files or making phone calls or doing whatever retired detectives do when they're planning operations. Get some sleep tonight if you can. Tomorrow's going to be fun. The good kind of fun. The justice kind. He hung up without saying goodbye because Uncle Ray didn't believe in prolonged phone farewells, and I sat there staring at my phone with a smile that was probably borderline concerning. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Donuts, coffee, and apparently a surprise that was going to teach everyone a lesson. I couldn't wait. At exactly 10 a.m., because Myra's internal clock apparently only worked when it came to waking up late enough to avoid uncomfortable conversations, she emerged from our bedroom wearing sunglasses. Inside, in our house, like she was some kind of celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi at the grocery store. Except the only person here was her husband, who'd spent the last 6 hours documenting her infidelity like he was preparing for a TED Talk on betrayal. The sunglasses were designer, obviously. Some brand I couldn't pronounce that probably cost more than my first car and came in a case that was nicer than my wallet. She wore them perched on her face like armor, like if she couldn't see me clearly, then somehow I couldn't see her clearly either, which is not how vision or guilt works, but hey, I wasn't going to interrupt her delusion. Not yet, anyway. I had plans, and those plans required me to play along with this charade for exactly one more day. Morning, I said from my position at the kitchen table where I'd been sitting for the past 2 hours, scrolling through my phone and absolutely not researching divorce attorneys in our area. Okay, fine, I was totally researching divorce attorneys, but in my defense, it's called being prepared. It's called due diligence. It's called, when your wife comes home at 4 a.m. smelling like another man's cologne, maybe you start thinking about your legal options. She stretched, actually stretched like she was in some kind of yoga video, arms above her head, making this little sound that was probably supposed to be cute, but just came across as theatrical, and yawned so wide I could see her back molars. "Morning," she mumbled back, her voice still scratchy from sleep or wine or lies. Probably all three mixed together in some unholy cocktail of consequences she hadn't faced yet. "Rough night?" I asked, keeping my voice light and conversational, like I was asking about the weather or her opinion on what we should watch on Netflix later. Like I hadn't spent the entire night cataloging evidence and making phone calls and planning her emotional destruction with a retired detective who was probably right now sharpening his metaphorical knives in preparation for tomorrow's main event. "The team had a few drinks," she said, shuffling toward the coffee maker like a zombie in designer pajamas. She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like "the team had a few drinks" was a complete explanation for coming home when most people are waking up for their morning jogs. Like a few drinks somehow justified spending $173 at a restaurant that has sommeliers and requires reservations 3 weeks in advance. I watched her pour coffee into her favorite mug, the one that said "World's Best Wife," that her mom got her last Christmas, and wow, the irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife and serve it at the velvet spoon with a side of betrayal. She added cream, 2 sugars, stirred it exactly 12 times counterclockwise because she was one of those people with weird routines she claimed helped her focus, but really just made her predictable. "Must have been a long few drinks," I said, still playing the role of oblivious husband even though every fiber of my being wanted to slam my hand on the table and yell, "I know everything," like some dramatic reveal in a courtroom drama. "You came home after the moon clocked out." She laughed. Actually laughed, this nervous little sound that came out wrong, like a car trying to start in cold weather. "Don't be dramatic," she said, waving her hand dismissively like my concern about her whereabouts was just me being silly, just me being one of those overly attached husbands who thinks his wife should come home at reasonable hours and not smell like a cologne commercial. "Oh, I'm not," I said, taking a sip of my own coffee and maintaining eye contact over the rim of my mug like we were in some kind of staring contest, except she couldn't see my eyes because of her ridiculous sunglasses. "Drama needs an audience. I'm just documenting." The words came out before I could stop them, and I saw her freeze for just a second, just a fraction of a moment where her hand paused mid-stir and her shoulders tensed up like she'd heard something she wasn't supposed to hear. But then she recovered, smiled that fake smile she'd been perfecting over the past few months, and went back to her coffee like I hadn't just dropped a hint the size of a billboard. "Documenting what?" she asked, trying to sound amused, but landing somewhere closer to nervous. "My coffee routine." "Sure," I said, smiling back at her with the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "Let's go with that." She didn't catch that last part, or at least she pretended not to, which at this point was basically her default setting. Pretend everything's fine. Pretend the marriage isn't circling the drain like water going down after you've flushed something that shouldn't be flushed. Pretend that wearing sunglasses inside your own house is normal behavior for someone who has nothing to hide. She walked over to where I was sitting, leaned down, and kissed my cheek. The universal sign for "please don't check my texts, please don't ask questions, please just let me get away with this," because confrontation is uncomfortable and I'm really good at avoiding uncomfortable things. Her lips were cold from the air conditioning, and her perfume was back to normal, that vanilla-lavender combo that used to smell like home, but now just smelled like someone trying to cover up evidence. "I've got to get ready for work," she said, pulling back and heading toward the bedroom like she was escaping a crime scene. "Big presentation today. Brent wants me to lead the client meeting." Brent. She actually said his name. Just dropped it into casual conversation like it was nothing, like I hadn't called that man 3 hours ago and listened to him stammer through the worst alibi since the dog ate my homework. The audacity was almost impressive. It was like watching someone juggle chainsaws while standing in a pool of gasoline next to an open flame. Technically impressive, definitely stupid, absolutely going to end in disaster. "Good luck with that," I said, managing to keep my voice neutral even though internally I was screaming. I'm sure you and Brent will do great together. You seem to work really well as a team. If she caught the emphasis I put on team and together, she didn't show it. Just waved over her shoulder and disappeared into the bedroom, probably to pick out an outfit that said professional career woman and not person having an affair with her team lead while her husband plans her public humiliation with a retired detective. I listened to her get ready, the shower turning on, the blow dryer, the opening and closing of drawers and closet doors. Normal morning sounds that would have been comforting a week ago, but now just sounded like the ticking of a clock counting down to tomorrow morning, when Uncle Ray would show up with his folder and his donuts and his 32 years of experience making guilty people squirm. She emerged 20 minutes later fully dressed, fully made up, looking like the successful corporate professional she presented to the world. Hair perfect, makeup perfect, outfit perfectly pressed and coordinated. She looked good. I had to give her that. She looked like someone who had their life together, not like someone whose life was about to fall apart in spectacular fashion because they thought they were smarter than they actually were. I'll be home around 6, she said, grabbing her bag and her keys, checking her phone one more time before heading to the door. Want me to pick up dinner? The question was so normal, so domestic, so absolutely ridiculous given the circumstances that I almost laughed. She was asking about dinner like we were still playing house, like we were still that couple who coordinated meals and talked about our days and pretended that everything was fine when clearly nothing was fine and hadn't been fine for months. Sure, I said, because what else was I supposed to say? Whatever you want. She smiled. That fake smile again that didn't reach her eyes, that smile that said, I'm glad we're okay, when we were absolutely not okay and would never be okay again. Great. Love you. She threw it out there like a grenade disguised as affection, those two words that used to mean something but now just sounded like a lie wrapped in routine, wrapped in desperation. She didn't even wait for me to respond before she was out the door, keys jingling, heels clicking on the driveway, car starting up and pulling away like she was escaping. I watched her drive off from the kitchen window, watched her disappear down the street toward her office where she'd spend the day working with Brent and probably texting him about how her clueless husband didn't suspect anything, how they were safe, how they could keep this going as long as they were careful. Except they weren't safe. Not even a little bit. I pulled out my phone and texted Uncle Ray, living room, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring popcorn. He responded immediately. Already got a bag of the good stuff. Movie theater butter. This is going to be better than cable. I smiled. A real smile this time, not the fake ones I'd been giving Mira all morning. Tomorrow was going to be spectacular. Tomorrow was going to be the kind of confrontation that people talk about for years, the kind of justice that felt earned and deserved and perfectly orchestrated. Tomorrow, Mira was going to learn that you can't just say don't ask and expect the questions to disappear. Tomorrow, she was going to learn that wearing sunglasses inside doesn't make you invisible. Tomorrow, she was going to learn that the husband she thought was too dumb to notice was actually smart enough to build a case that would make Perry Mason proud. But today I was just going to sit here, drink my coffee, and enjoy the calm before the storm. Because the storm was coming. Oh boy, was it coming. And it was going to be beautiful. I started cleaning the house like a man possessed, like I was preparing for company, which technically I was. I vacuumed, dusted, organized, made sure everything was perfect because when you're about to stage a confrontation of epic proportions, the least you can do is make sure your living room doesn't look like a disaster area. Even revenge deserves a proper stage. By the time I finished, the house looked better than it had in months. Everything in its place, everything clean and organized and ready for tomorrow's show. I stood in the middle of the living room, looked around at my handiwork, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., Uncle Ray would walk through that door with his folder and his evidence and his decades of experience. And Mira, sweet, clueless Mira who thought she'd gotten away with it, would walk into the surprise of her life. I couldn't wait. I cleaned that house like Martha Stewart was coming over to film a home improvement segment, except instead of showing people how to arrange decorative pillows, I was preparing the stage for my wife's complete emotional dismantling. Every cushion got fluffed, every surface got wiped down, every piece of clutter got organized into neat little piles that screamed, a man with his life together lives here, instead of a man whose marriage is imploding lives here eating cereal over the sink at 2 in the morning. The living room got special attention because that's where tomorrow's main event would take place. I arranged the furniture like I was setting up for an interview show. Couch facing the armchair, coffee table positioned perfectly in the middle where Uncle Ray could dramatically slide evidence across like we were in some kind of legal thriller. I even bought fresh flowers for the side table because apparently when you're planning to destroy someone's world, aesthetics still matter. The flowers were lilies, which I later Googled and discovered symbolize renewal and rebirth, and honestly, that felt appropriate. This was going to be my rebirth, my liberation, my congratulations on finally growing a spine moment. I vacuumed twice. Twice. Not because the carpet was particularly dirty, but because the sound of the vacuum was oddly therapeutic and also drowned out the part of my brain that kept asking, "Are you sure about this?" Yes, brain, I'm sure. When your wife comes home at 4 a.m. smelling like another man and lies to your face while wearing sunglasses indoors like some kind of knockoff celebrity, you can be pretty damn sure about burning that bridge and roasting marshmallows over the flames. By 3 p.m., the house looked like something out of a home design magazine, the kind where everything's perfectly staged and you know nobody actually lives there because real people don't keep their homes this clean unless they're either OCD or preparing for company or plotting elaborate revenge schemes. In my case, it was option 3 with a side of option 2 because having Uncle Ray over meant the house needed to be presentable, and having Uncle Ray over to confront my cheating wife meant the house needed to be immaculate. I even brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The good stuff, not the grocery store brand I usually bought, because I'm cheap and caffeine is caffeine regardless of whether it costs $8 or $25 per bag. But this was a special occasion. This was the kind of event that required premium coffee, the kind that comes in bags with names like Midnight Thunder or Smoky Mountain Awakening, and tastes like someone liquefied sophistication and poured it into a cup. When you're about to drop nuclear truth bombs, caffeine helps. Good caffeine helps even more. Uncle Ray arrived early. Of course he did, because punctuality was apparently a detective superpower they taught at the academy along with how to read people and how to make criminals confess through sheer intimidation. It was 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before our scheduled meeting time, and he walked through my door like he owned the place wearing his old detective jacket. The jacket was leather, worn in all the right places, and had that look that said, "I've seen things, I've done things, and I'm about to make your life very difficult if you cross me." He carried a folder. Not just any folder. This thing was labeled evidence, spouses and other criminals, in his handwriting that looked like it had been forged in some kind of law enforcement font factory. The label alone made me want to high-five him. But we were professionals here. Well, he was a professional. I was just a guy whose wife thought he was too stupid to notice her affair, which honestly made me want to prove her wrong more than anything else in my entire life. "Nice place," Uncle Ray said, looking around the living room with the kind of appreciation you show when you notice someone's put in effort. "You clean all this yourself or hire somebody?" "Did it myself," I said, probably sounding a little too proud. "Figured if we're going to stage an intervention/confrontation/emotional apocalypse, we should at least do it in a clean environment." He nodded approvingly, setting his folder down on the coffee table with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred texts or classified documents. "Presentation matters. I've conducted interviews in interrogation rooms that looked worse than most people's garages. You did good, kid." Coming from Uncle Ray, that was basically the equivalent of winning an Oscar. The man didn't give compliments unless they were earned, and even then he delivered them like he was doing you a favor by acknowledging your existence. "Got everything?" I asked, eyeing the folder like it contained the secrets of the universe instead of just the secrets of my wife's infidelity. He tapped the folder with one finger, and I swear I heard angels singing. Or maybe that was just my imagination running wild with anticipation, but either way, the gesture was pregnant with promise. Receipts, photos, timestamps, GPS data from her phone. Don't ask how I got that. It's better you don't know. And even her boss's parking records from the office garage showing his car was there until 11 p.m. on 3 separate occasions when she claimed she was working late. I blinked. "You got all that in less than 24 hours. Kid, I spent 32 years getting information people didn't want me to have. This was Tuesday morning easy. I've had harder cases solving who ate the last donut in the break room." He paused, reached into his jacket pocket, and pulled out his phone. Oh, and a clip. A clip? I asked, not sure I wanted to know, but also desperately needing to know. He grinned, not a happy grin, but the kind of grin a cat makes when it's cornered a mouse and is deciding whether to play with it first or just end the game. Security footage from the Velvet Spoon parking lot. Nothing explicit, don't worry. I'm not running some kind of surveillance state operation here. But let's just say it shows your wife and Mr. Team Lead getting very friendly by his car. Hugging. Extended hugging. The kind of hugging that would make HR write up a violation report. I sat down on the couch because my legs suddenly felt like they'd forgotten how bones work. I knew she'd been cheating. Hell, I'd known since 4:03 a.m. when she stumbled through the door smelling like a cologne factory explosion. But having actual video evidence felt different. It felt real. It felt like the difference between suspecting someone robbed your house and actually watching the security footage of them walking out with your TV. You good? Uncle Ray asked, sitting down in the armchair across from me with the casual ease of someone who'd delivered bad news to hundreds of people over his career and had learned to spot when someone was about to lose it. Yeah, I said, even though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. Just processing. Take your time. We've got. He checked his watch, an old-school analog thing that probably cost less than Myra's sunglasses, but had more character than her entire wardrobe, about 8 minutes before showtime. You want to see the footage first, or wait for the live reveal? I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Live reveal. I want to see her face when she realizes she's been caught. Uncle Ray nodded like I'd just given the correct answer on a game show. Good choice. Always better to have the audience experience the evidence in real time. Creates more impact. More. What's the word the kids use these days? Drama? No, wait. Tea. Creates more tea. I couldn't help but laugh. Here was this 60-year-old retired detective trying to use Gen Z slang and somehow making it work through sheer confidence and the fact that he was about to help me catch my wife in a lie so big it needed its own zip code. Uncle Ray, you can't say tea and expect it to land, I said, still laughing despite the fact that my marriage was ending and my life was basically a country song without the truck or the dog. Why not? Tea is tea. It's a beverage. Makes perfect sense. He shrugged like language was just another puzzle he'd solve eventually through persistence and refusal to accept defeat. We sat there for a moment in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that happens between people who are on the same team and about to execute a plan that's either brilliant or completely insane. The folder sat on the coffee table between us like a loaded gun, just waiting to go off. She's not ready for this episode, Uncle Ray said finally, breaking the silence with the kind of understatement that would make British people proud. No, I agreed. She's really not. Good. He leaned back in the armchair, laced his fingers behind his head like he was settling in to watch his favorite movie. I've been retired for 5 years. And honestly, I've been bored out of my mind. Fishing's great, don't get me wrong, but you can only catch so many bass before you start missing the thrill of catching people in lies. This is going to be fun. Define fun, I said, suddenly nervous about what exactly Uncle Ray considered entertaining. The good kind of fun. The justice kind. The kind where bad people face consequences and good people get closure and everyone learns a valuable lesson about honesty and fidelity and why you don't mess with someone whose uncle has access to private investigators, security footage, and a Rolodex full of people who owe him favors. He grinned again. That kind of fun. I nodded, feeling my confidence return like a wave washing over a beach. This was happening. This was really happening. In approximately 6 minutes, Mira would walk through that door expecting a normal Wednesday morning, maybe expecting me to ask about her day or tell her I was running to the hardware store. And instead she'd get Uncle Ray sitting in our living room with a folder full of evidence that could end her career, her reputation, and definitely our marriage. You nervous? Uncle Ray asked, reading me like I was a book written in large print. Terrified, I admitted, but also weirdly excited. Is that normal? Completely normal. You're about to reclaim your power, set a boundary, and stop being the victim in your own life story. That's scary and exciting at the same time. Like the first time you jump off a high dive, or the first time you tell someone you love them knowing they might not say it back. He paused. Except in this case, you're jumping off the high dive, and she's the water you're about to make a very big splash in. The metaphor was weird, but somehow it worked. I was about to make a splash. A huge splash. The kind of splash that would create ripples for months, maybe years. Uncle Ray checked his watch again. 5 minutes. You ready? I took a deep breath, looked around my immaculately clean living room, thought about the coffee brewing in the kitchen and the folder on the table and the video footage that showed my wife hugging another man in a parking lot at midnight, and nodded. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. Then let's do this. Uncle Ray cracked his knuckles like a concert pianist preparing for a performance. Time to serve up some justice with a side of uncomfortable truth. My favorite meal. At 8:45 a.m., the front door opened with that familiar click that used to mean my wife is home, but now meant the main event is about to start and I have front row seats to the greatest show on earth. I heard her keys jingling, heard her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Those same expensive heels she'd been carrying in her hand 2 nights ago at 4:03 in the morning, and then heard her stop dead in her tracks like she'd just walked into an invisible wall made entirely of oh crap. Mira stood in the doorway between the entryway and the living room, frozen like someone had hit pause on a movie right before the plot twist. She was holding a croissant in one hand, because apparently she'd stopped at that bougie bakery downtown that charges $8 for bread shaped fancy, and her work bag in the other, looking like she'd just invented brunch and was ready to have a casual Wednesday morning before heading to the office to do whatever corporate people do when they're not having affairs with their coworkers. Then she saw us. Uncle Ray was sitting on the couch like a judge at a talent show, except instead of holding up scorecards, he was flipping through his folder with the kind of casual menace that comes from 3 decades of making criminals sweat. I sat beside him, calm as a monk with Wi-Fi and a fully charged phone, holding my coffee mug like it was a prop in a play I'd been rehearsing my entire life for this exact moment. Her jaw dropped, literally dropped, like someone had cut the strings holding it up, and her face went through about 17 different emotions in the span of 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, panic, forced casualness, more panic, and finally settling on that classic, I'm going to pretend this is normal expression that guilty people wear when they're trying to convince themselves they haven't been caught. What's going on? She asked, her voice doing that thing where it goes up at the end like she was asking a question, but really she was just stalling for time, while her brain tried to compute what the hell her husband was doing sitting on the couch with a retired detective at 8:45 on a Wednesday morning when he should be at work or running errands or doing literally anything besides this. Team meeting, I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee and maintaining eye contact like we were in some kind of Western standoff, except instead of guns we had evidence and uncomfortable truths. Didn't you say you liked those? Uncle Ray didn't even look up from his folder, just kept flipping pages like he was reading the morning newspaper and not a comprehensive dossier documenting my wife's affair. Hi, Mira, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone cops use when they pull you over and ask if you know why they stopped you. Friendly on the surface, threatening underneath, zero room for bullshit. Heard you had an interesting night the other day. Must be tiring keeping all those co-workers entertained. He said, co-workers, the way other people say cockroaches or jury duty, with just enough disgust to make it clear what he really meant without having to spell it out. Mira blinked. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish that had just been pulled out of water and was trying to remember how breathing worked. You can't just, she started, but Uncle Ray cut her off by doing something so simple and so devastating that I wanted to stand up and applaud. He slid a photo across the coffee table, not handed it to her, not walked it over. Just slid it across the table like a dealer dealing cards in a poker game where all the hands were terrible and everyone was about to lose their mortgage. The photo landed perfectly in the center of the table, face up, clear as day, damning as hell. It was Mira at the Velvet Spoon, sitting at a corner booth that probably cost extra because it was romantic or private or whatever euphemism fancy restaurants use for good place to have an affair. She was laughing in the photo, head thrown back, wine glass in hand, looking happier than I'd seen her look in months. And there, right next to her with his hand on her waist like he owned the place and the woman, was Brent. Brent from accounting. Brent who gives great feedback. Brent who was apparently also great at publicly displaying affection with other people's wives in upscale restaurants while spending their money. Mira gasped. Actually gasped, like someone in a soap opera who just found out their evil twin was real. Her face went pale. Not regular pale. But that specific shade of pale that happens when all the blood drains from your face because your brain needs it more to process the fact that you've been completely, totally, undeniably caught. I sipped my coffee. The moment was too perfect to rush. This was art. This was justice. This was better than any revenge movie I'd ever seen because this was real and it was happening in my living room, and I had premium coffee and a front row seat. That's, she started, but her voice cracked like thin ice under too much weight. That's not what it looks like. Uncle Ray supplied helpfully, finally glancing up from his folder with the kind of expression that said he'd heard that excuse approximately 8,000 times in his career, and it hadn't worked once. Because it looks like you and Mr. Team Lead here, he tapped Brent's face in the photo, having a very cozy dinner at a very expensive restaurant at a very late hour. But hey, what do I know? I only spent 32 years investigating people who lie for a living. He slid another photo across the table. This one showed Mira and Brent outside in the parking lot, standing by his car, a BMW, naturally, because of course the guy having an affair with my wife drove a car that cost more than most people's annual salary. They were hugging. Not a friendly good night, see you at work hug, but a full body, arms wrapped around each other, faces buried in each other's necks, kind of hug that lasted way longer than any professional relationship required. Extended team bonding. Uncle Ray asked, his voice dripping with more sarcasm than my coffee had caffeine. Very thorough, very hands-on. I'm sure HR would be fascinated by your approach to workplace collaboration. Myra's croissant fell out of her hand, just dropped straight to the floor like her grip on reality, landing with a sad little thud that somehow perfectly captured the mood of this entire situation. She didn't even notice. She was too busy staring at the photos, at Uncle Ray, at me, like she was a computer trying to process too much information at once and about to crash. I can explain, she whispered, finally finding her voice buried somewhere beneath the panic and the realization that her carefully constructed lies were crumbling faster than her overpriced pastry on our clean floor. I leaned back on the couch, crossed my arms, and smiled. Not a nice smile. This smile had teeth, metaphorically speaking, and those teeth were sharp and ready to bite. You could, I said, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. But remember what you said 2 nights ago when you came home at 4 in the morning smelling like a cologne commercial? Remember your exact words. She stared at me, face still pale, eyes wide, looking like she was desperately trying to remember what she'd said, while simultaneously trying to figure out how to unsay it. Don't ask, I supplied, my voice calm and cold and absolutely done with all of this. You said don't ask. So you know what? I'm just following instructions. Uncle Ray chuckled, that low, rumbling sound that came from deep in his chest and somehow managed to fill the entire room with judgment. He leaned back, completely relaxed, looking like a man who was enjoying the best entertainment he'd had in 5 years of retirement. My work here's done, he said, but he didn't move. He just sat there, grinning, watching Mira try to form words that wouldn't come. I reached into my pocket, slowly, deliberately, milking this moment for everything it was worth because I'd earned this, I'd planned this, and I was going to savor every single second. I pulled out an envelope. Not just any envelope, but a nice one, the kind you use for important documents or wedding invitations or, in this case, divorce papers. The envelope was crisp, white, official looking. I'd labeled it in my best handwriting, Performance Review, Marriage Edition. I held it out to her, arm extended, the envelope hanging in the space between us like a white flag, except instead of surrendering, I was declaring victory. Here, I said, since you're so into workplace feedback and professional development, I thought you might appreciate this. Mira didn't take it, just stared at it like it was a live snake or a subpoena or something else that could bite her if she touched it. Her hands were shaking. I could see them trembling by her sides, still holding her work bag like it was the only thing keeping her grounded to reality. What is that? She asked, even though I was pretty sure she already knew or at least suspected, because I wasn't exactly being subtle with the Performance Review, Marriage Edition label. Divorce papers, I said simply, no drama, no yelling, just stating facts like I was reading from a grocery list. Neatly printed, properly filed with the county clerk's office yesterday afternoon while you were at work, labeled appropriately because I figured if you appreciate feedback so much, you should definitely appreciate this. She looked up at me, her eyes starting to water in that way that meant tears were coming. The kind of tears that guilty people cry when they finally realize actions have consequences, and those consequences have addresses and legal documentation. "You're ending it?" she whispered, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing, like the possibility of her husband actually growing a spine and standing up for himself had never occurred to her in all the months she'd been lying to my face. I grinned. Couldn't help it. Really, the question was so absurd, so perfectly encapsulated everything that was wrong with her perspective on this entire situation, that I had to smile, or I would have laughed, and laughing felt too generous for this moment. "Just giving the performance review your behavior deserved," I said, still holding out the envelope like an offering or a threat or both. 0 stars. Would not recommend. Terrible communication, dishonest practices, inappropriate workplace relationships, and frequent violations of the basic terms and conditions outlined in our original agreement. Overall rating. Terminated effective immediately. Uncle Ray actually snorted at that, covering his mouth with his hand like he was trying to maintain professional decorum, but losing the battle. "Kid's got jokes," he muttered to himself, shaking his head with what looked like genuine pride. Mira stood there, speechless, the tears now officially falling down her cheeks, mascara starting to run because apparently she hadn't invested in the waterproof kind. Rookie mistake when you're living a double life that's bound to implode eventually. She looked at the envelope, at me, at Uncle Ray, back at the photos on the table showing her own betrayal immortalized in high-definition color. "This isn't fair," she finally managed to say, which was possibly the most tone-deaf thing she could have said given the circumstances, but also perfectly in character for someone who'd been cheating for months and thought she deserved sympathy. "You're right," I agreed, nodding like she'd made a valid point. "It's not fair. It wasn't fair when you lied to me for months. It wasn't fair when you spent our money on romantic dinners with your coworker. It wasn't fair when you came home at 4 in the morning and told me not to ask questions. So yeah, we're way past fair at this point. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of consequences, and the property values here are pretty brutal." Uncle Ray stood up, collecting his folder with the satisfied air of someone who'd just closed a case. "Well, I think that about covers it," he said, looking at Mira with something between pity and disgust. "You kids have fun working out the details. I'm gonna go get breakfast. Real breakfast, not $8 croissants that end up on the floor." He walked past Mira toward the door, paused, turned back. "Oh, and Mira, next time you decide to have an affair, maybe don't do it in a restaurant with security cameras. Just some free advice from a professional. You're welcome." And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any slam could have been. Uncle Ray didn't actually leave. Of course he didn't. The man had 32 years of experience with dramatic exits that weren't actually exits, and this was apparently one of them. He stood by the door, hand on the knob, grinning like a game show host about to reveal the grand prize, except the prize was more emotional devastation. "Actually," he said, turning back around with theatrical flair that would make Broadway jealous, "I think I'll stick around for a few more minutes. This is better than my morning crossword puzzle." He walked back to the armchair and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees like a seasoned interrogator who'd just remembered he had a few more questions. "Mira," he said, his voice shifting from sarcastic uncle to full detective mode. "On a scale of 1 to subpoena, how honest are you ready to be right now?" Mira crossed her arms defensively, tears still streaming, but her expression hardening into something that looked like anger mixed with cornered animal desperation. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice shaking but trying to sound confident. "You had no right to spy on me." "Spy?" Uncle Ray raised an eyebrow. "I prefer the term independent fact-finding mission. And technically, your husband had every right since you're still legally married and spending joint funds on your little romantic adventures. But sure, let's call it spying if that makes you feel better about getting caught." I couldn't help but jump in. "So it was your Uber receipt to the Velvet Spoon. But here we are." Before Mira could formulate whatever defensive argument she was trying to construct, probably something about privacy or trust, or how dare we fact-check her lies, there was a knock on the door. Not a casual knock, but a hesitant, uncertain knock that sounded like someone was really hoping nobody was home, but knew they had to be there anyway because they'd been summoned. I stood up, walked to the door with the confidence of a man who'd orchestrated this entire production down to the minute, and opened it. Standing on my doorstep, looking like he'd dressed in the dark and regretted every life choice that had led him to this moment, was Brent. Brent Henderson. Team lead Brent. Just a friend who gives great feedback, Brent. The same Brent from the photos currently spread across my coffee table like evidence at a crime scene, which technically they were. His face went from nervous to absolutely white when he saw Uncle Ray sitting in the armchair. Not regular white. We're talking ghost white, printer paper white. I've just seen my entire career flash before my eyes white. His mouth opened and closed a few times, no sound coming out, like a car engine trying to start on a cold morning and failing spectacularly. Am I early? He managed to stammer, which was possibly the dumbest question he could have asked given that I'd texted him at 8:30 this morning with a message that said 9 a.m. My house. Don't be late. We need to talk about your team bonding exercises. He knew exactly what this was. He just hadn't expected the full theatrical production. I smiled. That same cold, calculated smile I'd been perfecting over the past 48 hours. Right on time, actually. Come on in, Brent. Take a seat. I gestured to the couch next to Mira, who looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Her face had gone from pale to red to some combination of both that made her look like she was having an allergic reaction to consequences. You didn't, she whispered, staring at me with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Oh, I did, I said, closing the door behind Brent, who shuffled into the living room like a man walking to his own execution. You brought the co-workers to the bar? I brought them to breakfast. Fair's fair. Brent sat down on the far end of the couch, as far from Mira as physically possible, while still technically being on the same piece of furniture. He looked like he wanted to melt into the cushions or possibly teleport to another dimension where angry husbands and retired detectives didn't exist. Uncle Ray slid the photos across the table again. The same photos, but now with their starring actors present in the room. So, Brent, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone that made grown men confess to crimes they didn't commit just to make the pressure stop. How's the team bonding going? Looks pretty thorough from these pictures. Very hands-on approach. I'm sure your HR department would be fascinated by your management techniques. Brent looked at the photos, at Mira, at me, back at the photos. His hands were shaking visibly now, gripping his knees like they were the only solid things in a world that had suddenly gone liquid beneath him. It was a misunderstanding, he blurted out, the words coming fast and desperate like he'd been holding them in, and they finally exploded. It wasn't supposed to. I nodded slowly, sitting down in the other armchair and sipping my coffee like I was watching a nature documentary and not the complete destruction of two people's credibility. You know what else was a misunderstanding? I asked calmly. My marriage certificate. I thought it meant something. Apparently, I misunderstood what "till death do us part" actually meant. Silly me. Uncle Ray chuckled, pulling out another photo from his folder. This one a screenshot of text messages. I had no idea how he'd gotten those, and honestly, I didn't want to know. The man had resources that probably weren't entirely legal, but were definitely effective. Want to explain these? He asked, sliding the screenshot toward both of them. Because from what I'm reading here, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was pretty deliberate. The room went silent. The kind of silence that happens when everyone realizes they've been caught. The evidence is overwhelming, and there's absolutely no way to talk their way out of this corner they'd backed themselves into. The silence in that room was holy. Not church holy, but more like the moment right before a judge reads a verdict and everyone holds their breath waiting to hear if they're going to prison or walking free. Except in this case, there was no jury, no deliberation, just cold hard evidence, two guilty parties, and a retired detective who looked like he was having the time of his life. Mira looked at me, her face pale and shaking, mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint applied by someone who'd already lost the battle. She tried to form words, her mouth opening and closing, searching for something, anything, that could possibly make this situation better. Spoiler alert, there was nothing. I can explain, she muttered finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Like if she said it quietly enough, maybe I wouldn't hear it, or maybe the universe would take pity on her and rewind the last 48 hours. I stood up, calm as ever, like I was getting up to refill my coffee instead of ending a marriage that had lasted 5 years on paper, but had actually ended the moment she decided another man's cologne was more important than our wedding vows. I looked down at her, at Brent cowering on the couch like a kid who'd been caught stealing cookies, except the cookies were someone's wife, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a weird sense of relief that this was finally over. You could explain, I said slowly, letting each word land with the weight it deserved. But remember what you said 2 nights ago? Your exact words when you stumbled through that door at 4 in the morning. She stared at me, tears flowing freely now, probably realizing where this was going but unable to stop it, like watching a car crash in slow motion. Don't ask, I said, my voice steady and cold. You said don't ask. So you know what? I'm just following instructions. I'm not asking. I'm not wondering. I'm not giving you the opportunity to spin another lie or craft another excuse or tell me it wasn't what it looked like when we both know exactly what it looked like. Uncle Ray chuckled from his armchair, standing up and stretching like he'd just finished watching a particularly satisfying movie. My work here's done, he announced, collecting his folder with the satisfied air of someone who'd successfully closed a case. Try not to trip over your excuses on the way out, Mira. They're everywhere. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back at Brent. Oh, and Brent, might want to update your LinkedIn. Something tells me your collaborative working relationship with Mira is about to become significantly less collaborative. Also, you might want to check your employee handbook regarding fraternization policies. Just a friendly tip from someone who's seen a lot of people lose their jobs for less. Brent looked like he might actually pass out. His face had gone from white to green, and I was genuinely concerned he might throw up on my freshly vacuumed carpet. I reached down and picked up the envelope from where it had fallen near Myra's feet. Those same expensive feet in those same expensive heels that had clicked across our floor at 4 in the morning. I held it out to her again, steady as a surgeon with a scalpel. Take it, I said simply. She looked at the envelope like it was radioactive. You're really ending it? She whispered, the question so absurd I almost laughed. Just like that. I tilted my head, considering her question with the kind of patience you show a child who's asked why the sky is blue. Just like that. I repeated, Mira, you ended it months ago when you started lying to my face. You ended it every time you came home late smelling like someone else. You ended it when you spent our money on romantic dinners with your coworker. I'm just doing the paperwork. I handed her the envelope. Divorce papers, neatly printed, properly filed, labeled feedback form, marriage edition. She took it with shaking hands, staring at it like it might bite her. 0 stars, I said, unable to resist one final callback. Would not recommend. Terrible communication, fraudulent advertising, and severe violations of the service agreement. Overall rating, terminated effective immediately. Please vacate the premises within 30 days as outlined in the documents. Uncle Ray was fully grinning now, heading toward the door. Kid's got jokes and legal knowledge. I taught him well. You didn't teach me any of this, I called after him. Didn't I, though? He winked. See you at Christmas. This story's gonna be legendary at family gatherings. And then he was gone, leaving me standing in my living room with my soon-to-be ex-wife, her affair partner who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the couch cushions, and a sense of closure I hadn't felt in months. Mira stood there speechless, clutching the envelope, probably running through every scenario in her head, trying to figure out how this had happened, how her careful lies had unraveled so spectacularly, how the husband she thought was too oblivious to notice had actually been 10 steps ahead the entire time. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself another cup of coffee, because why not? I had nowhere to be and all the time in the world now that I wasn't spending it worrying about where my wife was or who she was with. I turned back to face them, leaning against the counter with my mug. Next time she mentions a team dinner, I said, looking at the space between them rather than at them directly, I'll send HR a thank you note for taking out my trash. It was petty. It was mean. It was absolutely perfect. And as I stood there in my clean kitchen, in my soon-to-be solely mine house, drinking premium coffee and watching 2 people realize that actions have consequences, I smiled. A real smile this time. Because I was finally, actually, genuinely free.